The fluorescent lights in the basement of the Veterans Affairs Hospital hummed with that particular frequency that gets under your skin after the first hour. 16 folding chairs arranged in a circle, 12 of them occupied by men who had seen things that would never make it into their grandchildren's history books. The kind of things that wake you up at 3 in the morning, soaked in sweat, reaching for a weapon that isn't there anymore. Rebecca Stone sat in the back row, spine straight despite the uncomfortable metal chair, dark eyes scanning the room with the kind of awareness that never really turns off. 45 years old, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, no jewelry except for a plain silver watch on her left wrist. She wore jeans and a dark blue fleece jacket, the kind you could buy at any sporting goods store for $30. Nothing about her suggested what she had been, what she still was, deep in the marrow of her bones. The small gym she ran in Coronado paid the bills, barely, self-defense classes for teenage girls, basic fitness training for middle-aged men trying to recapture something they had lost. It was honest work, simple work, the kind of work where nobody asked questions about the scars on her forearms, or why she sometimes flinched at sudden loud noises, or why she had been coming to this support group every Wednesday evening for exactly 8 weeks without ever saying a single word about her own service. Across the circle, Sergeant Major William Madsen sat with his arms crossed over his chest, a human wall of skepticism and old-school Marine Corps values. 62 years old, silver crew cut, face like weathered granite, Purple Heart citations from a war most of these younger veterans had only read about in history class. Vietnam, the kind of war that did not come with ticker tape parades or yellow ribbon bumper stickers. Just a long flight home to a country that wanted to forget you existed. Bull Madsen, that was what everyone called him. Not because he was stupid, because once he decided something was right, you could not move him with a bulldozer and a winch. He had lost his wife to cancer 3 years ago. Buried her on a Tuesday, back at the police station by Friday, 30 years on the San Diego PD, now retired. Now volunteering at the VA because sitting at home staring at her empty chair was worse than watching young men try to reassemble the pieces of themselves that war had scattered across foreign deserts. He did not believe in therapy. Real men handled their problems. You sucked it up. You drove on. You did not sit in circles talking about your feelings like some kind of afternoon television show. But Dr. Helen Park had asked him to attend, not as a patient, as an observer, a bridge between generations. The young guys respected him, listened when he talked. Maybe his presence would help them open up. So far, Bull had concluded that the whole enterprise was touchy-feely nonsense that would have gotten you laughed out of any barracks he had ever served in. But he kept coming back. Because on the worst nights, when the dreams got bad, he understood why they needed this, even if he would never admit needing it himself. Dr. Park sat at the head of the circle, 52 years old, calm voice, patient eyes. She had served as an Army medic in Iraq before going back to school for her psychology degree. She understood the language these men spoke, the things they could not say, the weight they carried that had nothing to do with the gear they had humped across hostile terrain. Danny Ortiz was speaking now, 28 years old, Marine Corps, 3 tours, IED blast outside Fallujah that had killed half his squad and left him with traumatic brain injury, partial hearing loss in his left ear, and hands that shook so bad some mornings he could not hold a coffee cup without spilling it. He worked at a warehouse now, forklift operator. The kind of job where nobody asked about the scars or why he sometimes stopped in the middle of a shift and just stared at nothing for 5 minutes straight. His voice cracked as he described the moment. The flash of light, the pressure wave that felt like God's fist crushing your chest, the smell of burning diesel and something worse, something that used to be his friend Martinez. His hands trembled worse as he spoke, sweat beading on his forehead despite the basement chill. Then something shifted in his eyes. That terrible distance, like he was not looking at the circle of chairs anymore, but at something 8,000 miles away and 5 years in the past. His breathing accelerated, shallow, fast, hyperventilating. His right hand moved to his waist, grabbing for something that was not there, looking for the rifle, always looking for the rifle. Incoming! Get down! He screamed it. Not loud, worse than loud, the kind of scream that comes from somewhere primal and terrified. He lunged out of his chair, stumbling, and his hand went to his boot. pulled out a folding knife, 4-inch blade. He had smuggled it in because being unarmed felt like being naked, felt like being dead. The room erupted, veterans scrambling backward, chairs clattering. Someone shouted, "Call security." Dr. Park reached for the panic button on the wall, but Danny was already moving, eyes wild and unfocused. The knife raised, charging toward her because, in his mind, she was not Dr. Park anymore. She was the enemy. She was the threat. She was the thing that needed to be eliminated before it killed everyone he loved. Rebecca Stone moved like water. One moment she was sitting in the back row, still and calm. The next she was crossing the 15 feet between her chair and Danny Ortiz in absolute silence, no wasted motion. Every step placed with precision that spoke of training so deep it had become cellular memory. Her left hand intercepted his wrist mid-swing, fingers finding the exact pressure point that made his hand spasm open involuntarily. The knife clattered to the concrete floor. Her right arm wrapped around his torso from behind, not a chokehold but something else. Something that combined control with an almost maternal firmness. "Easy, Marine." Her voice was low, measured, the kind of voice that cuts through panic like a razor. "You are safe." The convoy made it home. Martinez is alive. He is in Phoenix. He has 2 daughters. Emma is 7. Sophia is 4. You told me about them last week. Remember? She held him, not fugging him, not restraining him with force, just anchoring him, being present and solid and real while his nervous system slowly remembered that he was not in Fallujah. He was in San Diego. It was Wednesday. The year was 2024. He was safe. His breathing slowed. 30 seconds, 60, 90. The wild look faded from his eyes, replaced by confusion and then horror at what he had almost done. He started sobbing, great racking sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. Rebecca guided him back to his chair with gentle hands, kneeling beside him, maintaining eye contact. The technique I just used combines pressure point manipulation with psychological grounding. When your mind gets trapped in a traumatic memory, you need multiple anchors to pull you back. Physical sensation, concrete facts, emotional connection. It is something I learned working with combat trauma cases. Dr. Park stared at her. In 3 years of running these groups, she had never seen anyone handle a flashback crisis that effectively, that quickly, that gently. "Where did you learn that technique?" Rebecca's expression remained neutral. "Just something I picked up. Reading. Training courses." Bull Madsen stood slowly. 6'2", 220 pounds. Every inch of it skeptical. He had been watching Rebecca for 8 weeks. The way she sat, the way she moved, the way her eyes never stopped scanning exits and angles. He knew that posture. He had worn it himself for 40 years. "Bullshit." The word cut through the room like a gunshot. Several veterans flinched. Danny looked up, still shaky, confused by the sudden tension. Bull pointed at Rebecca. "That was not something you learned in a weekend seminar, lady. That was military close quarters combat. I have seen it. Force Recon used variations of it in Vietnam. Special operations units use it now. So I will ask you again, where did you learn that?" Rebecca stood, smooth, controlled, her face giving away nothing. "Mr. Madsen, I understand your concern, but I assure you it was just basic crisis intervention. Dr. Park teaches similar techniques." Bull took a step forward. "Do not insult my intelligence. I saw how you moved, the distance you covered, the precision of that wrist lock, and that." He pointed at her jacket. When she had moved, it had shifted, exposing the inner collar. Pinned there, small and silver and unmistakable, was a Navy SEAL Trident. Bull's face went from skeptical to furious in half a heartbeat. His voice rose, echoing off the basement walls. "You have got to be kidding me. You are wearing a SEAL Trident, here, in a veteran support group." Rebecca said nothing, just looked at him with those calm, dark eyes. "This is stolen valor. This is exactly the kind of garbage that makes me sick. People pretending they served. People pretending they earned the right to wear that insignia. My son died in Fallujah. He was a real Marine, a real warrior. And you sit here with your fake credentials, probably trolling for attention, making a mockery of everything he sacrificed." The other veterans were watching now. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked curious. A few looked angry on Bull's behalf. Danny Ortiz, still recovering from his flashback, spoke up quietly. "Bull, she just saved Dr. Park. Maybe we should hear her out. Bull rounded on him. Shut up, kid. You do not understand. Women were not allowed in SEAL training until 2016. And even then, it took until 2021 before the first woman made it through the course. She is what, 45? Do the math. There is no possible way she could be a SEAL. It is a lie. It is stolen valor. And it is a federal crime. Rebecca remained standing, calm, her voice quiet but clear. You are absolutely right, Sergeant Major. Women were not officially allowed in SEAL training until 2016. She reached into her jacket pocket slowly, deliberately, and pulled out her phone. Dialed a number, put it on speaker. This is Rebecca Stone, 545 Bayshore Drive, Coronado. I need to report a potential stolen valor violation. Yes, I will wait for an officer. No, I am the one being accused. I am calling it in myself. She hung up, sat back down, folded her hands in her lap. The room went silent. That terrible, heavy silence where everyone knows something significant just happened, but nobody quite understands what. Dr. Park stood, hands raised in a calming gesture. Becca, you do not have to do this. We can discuss this privately. Rebecca shook her head. It is fine, doctor. This needs to be resolved properly. If Mr. Madsen believes I am committing a crime, then we should handle it through proper channels. Bull stared at her. Something in his gut twisted. This was not how guilty people acted. Guilty people got defensive, made excuses, ran. They did not call the police on themselves and then sit there like they were waiting for a bus. But he had already made the accusation, already called her out in front of a dozen witnesses. His pride, that old Marine Corps stubbornness, would not let him back down now, even as doubt began creeping in around the edges. 20 minutes of excruciating silence. Danny tried to apologize to Dr. Park, who assured him it was not his fault, that his flashback was a symptom of his condition. Nothing to be ashamed of. Other veterans shifted in their seats. A few left. Bull remained standing, arms crossed, jaw set. Rebecca sat perfectly still, eyes closed, breathing slow and even. Meditating maybe, or just conserving energy like someone who had learned to sleep in worse places than a basement folding chair. The door at the top of the stairs opened. Footsteps. Heavy. Military boots on concrete. 2 agents from NCIS, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Not regular military police. These were federal investigators. The lead agent was a woman in her 40s, dark suit, professional demeanor, eyes that missed nothing. Rebecca Stone? Rebecca stood, offered her wrists without being asked. Yes, ma'am. The agent hesitated. Ma'am, restraints are not necessary at this time. Rebecca's voice remained calm. I have been accused of violating federal law. Protocol requires proper custody procedures. I would prefer you follow protocol, agent. The agent exchanged a glance with her partner. Shrugged. Applied handcuffs. Loose. Respectful. Not the kind you use on actual criminals. As they led Rebecca toward the stairs, she paused next to Dr. Park, leaned in close, whispered something that only the doctor could hear. Dr. Park's eyes widened. She grabbed Rebecca's arm. Are you certain? Rebecca nodded once. Then she was moving again, climbing the stairs, flanked by federal agents, her posture straight and unbowed. The last thing the group saw was her silhouette against the harsh light from the upper hallway before the door closed. Bull stood in the sudden silence, feeling something cold settle in his stomach. He looked down at his hands, remembered his son. Captain Ryan Madsen, 24 years old, killed in action, November 12, 2007, 17 years ago. 17 years and it still felt like yesterday. Ryan had been everything Bull believed a Marine should be. Brave, dedicated, honorable. He had died holding a defensive position so that other men could escape an ambush. The official report said he saved 4 Navy SEALs, gave his life so they could complete their mission. Bull had that report memorized, read it so many times the paper had started to tear along the folds. But he had never learned the names of the SEALs his son had saved. That information was redacted, classified, need to know. He thought about the way Rebecca had moved, the precision, the training, the absolute calm in a crisis. And he thought about the way she had looked at him when he accused her. Not angry, not defensive, just sad, like she had expected it, like she had been waiting for this moment and had accepted it a long time ago. Dr. Park was on her phone now, speaking in low, urgent tones. She hung up, looked at Bull. Mr. Madsen, I need you to come with me, now. Where? The NCIS field office. There are people who need to speak with you about what just happened. I am not going anywhere until someone tells me what the hell is going on. Dr. Park's voice dropped, became hard, became the voice of someone who had seen combat and would not tolerate insubordination. Sergeant Major Madsen, you just accused a decorated combat veteran of stolen valor based on incomplete information. You have put events in motion that cannot be stopped. The least you can do is show up and face the consequences of your actions like the Marine you claim to be. Bull felt like he had been slapped. But she was right. He had made the call. Literally. He had forced this confrontation. Whatever came next, he owed it to everyone involved to see it through. He nodded stiffly. Lead the way. The NCIS field office was 20 minutes away in downtown San Diego. Concrete and glass, security checkpoints, federal agents with sidearms and serious expressions. Bull was led to a conference room, told to wait, told to surrender his cell phone, told to sign a non-disclosure agreement that carried language about federal prison time if violated. He signed without reading it. Whatever this was, he was already neck-deep. The door opened. An old man walked in, late 60s, maybe early 70s. Navy dress whites, chest absolutely covered in ribbons. More fruit salad than Bull had seen outside of a Marine Corps birthday ball. Silver hair, ramrod posture, eyes like blue ice. Bull stood automatically. You did not stay seated when a flag officer entered the room. Sit down, Sergeant Major. Bull sat. The old man settled into the chair across from him, studied him for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 4 decades in uniform and command decisions that had shaped the lives of thousands. My name is Admiral Thomas Garrett. I served with Navy Special Warfare for 38 years before retiring in 2018. I currently work as a consultant for the Department of Defense on matters related to special operations and personnel security. Do you know why you are here? Because I accuse someone of stolen valor. Not just someone, Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Stone, who served under my direct command for 5 years, who holds decorations I am not authorized to discuss, who has made sacrifices you cannot begin to imagine, and who you just accused of being a fraud in front of a room full of witnesses. Bull felt his mouth go dry. If this admiral was here, if he knew Rebecca personally, if he was talking about classified decorations. I did not know, Garrett leaned back. No, you did not, because you were not supposed to know. Nobody was supposed to know. That was the entire point. He pulled a folder from the leather case he had brought, set it on the table between them, opened it. Inside was a photograph. 6 women in BUD/S training gear, standing on a beach, faces partially obscured by sand and sweat and pixelation that looked intentional. In 2003, the Secretary of Defense authorized a black program. Codename ATHENA Initiative. The objective was to identify and train female operators capable of SEAL-level performance for missions where male operators would be compromised. Post 9/11, we had situations in Afghanistan and Iraq where we needed to interact with women, search homes, gather intelligence in cultures where male soldiers were forbidden from those interactions. Female engagement teams helped, but we needed more. He tapped the photo. 6 women were selected from across all branches. They had special operations backgrounds, combat experience, psychological profiles that suggested they could handle extreme stress without breaking. Only 2 completed the full program. He pulled out a second photo. Rebecca Stone, younger, maybe 30 years old, wearing combat fatigues, holding a rifle, standing in front of a burning building in what looked like a Middle Eastern city. Her face was streaked with dirt and something darker. Her eyes held that 1,000-yard stare Bull recognized from his own mirror on bad mornings. Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Stone, ATHENA 1, 43 combat missions over 5 years, 28 confirmed hostile kills, 17 high-value target extractions, Navy Cross for actions in Fallujah, 2007. Bull's vision blurred. Fallujah, 2007. That was where Ryan died. His voice came out hoarse. My son was killed in Fallujah. November 12th, 2007. Garrett nodded slowly. I know, Captain Ryan Madsen, United States Marine Corps. He was part of the quick reaction force for an ATHENA operation that went sideways. Bad intelligence. Compromised mission. By the time your son's convoy arrived, the compound was surrounded by hostiles. He saved 4 Navy SEALs that day. Sergeant Major gave his life holding the line so they could extract the HVT. Bull could not breathe, could not speak. The room felt like it was tilting. Garrett continued, voice gentle now. One of those 4 SEALs was Lieutenant Rebecca Stone. She was 28 years old. It was her 6th combat mission, and she has carried the weight of your son's sacrifice every single day for 17 years. The folder contained more photos, mission logs with most of the text redacted in black bars, after action reports, commendations, and all classified, all real, and all proving that Rebecca Stone was not a fraud. She was a ghost, a warrior who had served in absolute secrecy because the missions required it, because the program required it, because sometimes the most important work happens in the shadows where nobody will ever know your name. Bull put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. 17 years. 17 years he had mourned his son without knowing why Ryan had really died, without knowing who he had saved. And now, tonight, he had repaid that sacrifice by accusing one of those people of being a liar, a fraud, a criminal. I did not know. God help me, I did not know. Garrett stood, walked around the table, put a hand on Bull's shoulder. Neither did she, Sergeant Major, not until tonight. The ATHENA program was compartmentalized. Operators did not always know the full picture of who they were saving or why. But I can tell you this, when I debriefed her after Fallujah, when I told her a Marine had died holding the line so she could complete the mission, she asked me his name. I could not tell her. Classified, need to know, but she found out anyway. Pulled strings, called in favors. When she learned it was your son, she attended his memorial service, sat in the back, left before anyone could ask who she was. She has visited his grave every year on November 12th, brings flowers, tells him about the lives his sacrifice protected, the missions his courage made possible. Both looked up through tears. She has been visiting Ryan's grave for 17 years. The door opened. Rebecca walked in, no longer handcuffed, a bandage on her left shoulder where the bullet had grazed her during the ambush in the park. She looked tired. She looked older than 45, but she looked calm. Her eyes met Bull's. She saw the tears, saw the broken look on his face, walked over to where he sat, knelt down so they were eye level. Sergeant Major Madsen, your son was the bravest man I ever saw. When the RPG hit our vehicle, when we were pinned down and outnumbered, he could have called for backup and waited. Instead, he grabbed a SAW and charged the enemy position alone. Gave us 90 seconds. That is all we needed. 90 seconds of covering fire while we extracted the target and got clear. Ryan Madsen gave us those 90 seconds, and then he gave his life. Bull reached out with shaking hands, grabbed her shoulders, pulled her into an embrace. This woman his son had died for. This ghost warrior he had just accused of being a fraud. He sobbed into her shoulder like a child, 17 years of grief finally finding release. And she held him steady, the way she had held Danny Ortiz earlier, anchoring him while his world reassembled itself around new truth. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. You were protecting your son's honor, protecting the integrity of the Trident. You did exactly what a good Marine should do. There is nothing to apologize for. But there was. They both knew it. And in that moment, kneeling on the floor of a federal interrogation room, 2 warriors from different generations began the slow work of forgiveness. Admiral Garrett cleared his throat. As touching as this is, we have a bigger problem. Rebecca's cover is blown. As of tonight, her identity as Athena 1 is compromised, which means anyone who wants to find her now can. And there are people, Sergeant Major, very dangerous people, who have been looking for Athena operators for a very long time. Bull pulled back, wiped his eyes. What kind of people? The kind who do not forgive, the kind who hold grudges, the kind who remember that Athena operators killed their leaders, disrupted their operations, and cost them millions in revenue and thousands in casualties. Terrorist networks, criminal organizations, foreign intelligence services. Take your pick. Rebecca stood, helped Bull to his feet. 3 weeks ago, the other Athena graduate, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Walsh, was killed in a car accident in Virginia. Brake line failure. NCIS investigated. It was not an accident. Bull felt ice water in his veins. Someone is hunting you. Has been for months. Walsh's death confirmed it. Tonight, when I was arrested, when my photo went into federal databases, I knew it would draw attention. I was counting on it. You used yourself as bait. I used myself as bait. For what? To find out who is leaking information, to see who shows up, to force this whole situation into the open before more people die. Garrett's phone buzzed. He looked at it, face went pale, looked at Rebecca. The Pentagon just received a video, posted to a jihadist website 18 minutes ago. He turned his tablet around, hit play. The screen showed a man in an orange jumpsuit, kneeling, hands bound, looking directly at the camera. Mid-30s, short dark hair, face bruised but defiant. Behind him stood three masked figures with rifles. Bull recognized military bearing when he saw it. This man was American military. Special operations, probably. The man spoke, voice hoarse but clear. "My name is Lieutenant Marcus Stone, United States Navy SEAL. I was captured 6 months ago during operations in Syria. My captors have made me an offer. Provide intelligence on American special operations, or they will hunt down and execute my mother, Rebecca Stone, who I have just learned is Athena 1. Rebecca's face did not change, but something died behind her eyes. The video continued. Marcus looking directly at the camera now. "Mom, if you are watching this, they know everything. They know where you are. They know your new identity, and they are coming. Please just give them what they want. Do not let more people die for this." The video cut to black. Silence in the room, heavy, suffocating. Bull looked at Rebecca. "That is your son." She nodded. "Has not spoken to me in 2 years. Last thing he said was that I chose the Navy over family, that I had no right to call myself his mother." Garrett stood. "How did they get a photo of you from tonight's arrest that fast?" "The video was posted 18 minutes after you were taken into custody. That means someone in law enforcement, someone with access to NCIS databases, sent them that image within minutes." Rebecca's voice was flat. "We have a mole. Someone inside. Someone who has been tracking Athena operators and feeding information to whoever wants us dead." Bull looked between them. "What do you need?" Garrett met his eyes. "A team. People we can trust absolutely. People who have no connection to the Athena program and therefore cannot be the leak." Bull straightened. "I am 62 years old. I have not been in combat since 1973. I am not qualified." Rebecca put her hand on his shoulder. "You are Force Recon. You know small unit tactics. More importantly, you are the only person in this room who has zero connection to Athena. You cannot be the leak. And Sergeant Major, you understand honor. You understand sacrifice. That is worth more than youth or training. What is the mission? Find the mole, extract my son, survive." Bull thought about Ryan, thought about 17 years of visiting a grave and wondering if his son's death had meant something. Thought about this woman who had been carrying that weight in silence, honoring his boy's memory when nobody else even knew the truth. He thought about doing nothing, going home, letting someone else handle it, living whatever years he had left in quiet retirement. Then he looked at Rebecca's face, saw the fear she was hiding, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, her son could be saved. The same hope Bull had carried for 17 years, that maybe someday he would understand why Ryan had to die. "When do we start?" Garrett smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was a smile of an old warrior who had just been given permission to go back to war one more time. "Right now." The room's lights seemed brighter suddenly. The air felt charged. 3 people who should have been enjoying retirement, enjoying peace, enjoying lives built on the sacrifices of their youth, were instead preparing to walk back into darkness. To face enemies who had been waiting years for this moment. To risk everything for a chance to save one man and expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of military and intelligence leadership. Bull looked at his reflection in the window. 62 years old, gray hair, wrinkled face, hands that shook sometimes from old wounds and older memories. Not exactly operator material anymore. But then he thought about Ryan, 24 forever, brave forever, dead forever. And he thought maybe, just maybe, this was why he had survived Vietnam when so many others had not. This was why he had spent 30 years as a cop. This was why he had been in that support group tonight. Not coincidence, purpose. Rebecca was watching him, reading his face the way she probably read terrain and threats and tactical situations. "You do not have to do this, Sergeant Major. This is not your fight." Bull straightened to attention, the old posture coming back like muscle memory. "Ma'am, with respect, you are wrong. Your son was willing to die to save my boy. My boy did die to save you. That makes this exactly my fight, Semper Fi." Rebecca's eyes glistened, just for a moment. Then the mask came back. The operator. The ghost. "Athena 1, Semper Fi, Sergeant Major. Now let's go get my son back." They walked out together. 3 warriors heading into the unknown. The old admiral with his fading mind but unshakable will. the ghost operator whose cover had just been burned, the aging Marine who had thought his war was over. Behind them, the conference room lights dimmed automatically. The folder of classified documents remained on the table. Proof that sometimes the most important battles are fought by people whose names will never appear in any history book. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones nobody knows exist, until the day they step into the light and remind the world what honor really means. The interrogation room at NCIS headquarters smelled like burnt coffee, and decades of nervous sweat soaked into concrete walls. Rebecca Stone sat at the metal table, hands folded, posture perfect, despite 3 hours of questioning. No lawyer, she had waived that right immediately. Across from her, Special Agent Sarah Chen studied a file that was mostly black bars and redactions, searching for something that made sense in a service record that read like a classified operations manual with all the good parts cut out. Agent Chen was 42, 15 years with NCIS. She had investigated everything from petty theft on naval bases to espionage cases that could topple governments. But she had never seen a file quite like this. 18 pages, 15 of them completely redacted except for dates and duty station codes that led nowhere. The clearance level required to access the full record was above her pay grade, way above. Commander Stone, I want to be very clear about something. This feels wrong to me. Your demeanor, your willingness to cooperate, the way you called this in on yourself, none of it fits the profile of someone committing stolen valor. Rebecca's dark eyes met hers without flinching. I appreciate your professionalism, Agent Chen. You are doing your job exactly as you should, but I cannot do it properly without information. Your service record shows basic training at Great Lakes in 2002, then nothing but classifications and redactions until your retirement in 2021. 19 years of service, and I cannot tell you what you actually did beyond the fact that it required the highest security clearances our military possesses. Then perhaps you should speak with someone who has those clearances. I have tried. Every request gets kicked back with the same response: need to know. And apparently an active stolen valor investigation does not qualify as need to know. Rebecca almost smiled, the system working as intended. The door opened. Admiral Thomas Garrett entered without knocking, moving with the certainty of a man who had spent 4 decades not asking permission. Behind him came Dr. Helen Park, and to Agent Chen's surprise, Sergeant Major William Madsen. The old Marine looked like he had been crying. His eyes were red. His jaw was set in that particular way men of his generation used when they were trying very hard not to fall apart. Admiral, Dr. Park, Agent Chen stood automatically. I was not informed you would be joining this interview. Garrett settled into the chair next to Rebecca. This is no longer just an interview, Agent. This is a national security briefing, and you are about to be read into information that will fundamentally change your understanding of what happened tonight. Sir, with respect, I am the investigating officer on a federal crime. I cannot simply abandon proper procedure because a flag officer requests it. Garrett pulled a document from his leather case, slid it across the table. The presidential seal watermarked every page. The classification marking at the top was one Agent Chen had only seen twice in her career. TSSCI, Top Secret Sensitive Compartmented Information. The kind of clearance that meant you could not even acknowledge the program existed without risking federal prison. Read page 3, paragraph 2. Chen flipped through the document, eyes widening as she scanned the text. Her hands started shaking by the second sentence. This authorizes military deception operations for the purposes of safeguarding special access programs. It specifically mentions the right of operators to maintain cover identities that contradict official service records. Now read the list of programs covered under this authorization. Chen's finger traced down the page, stopped at line 7. ATHENA Initiative, Code Designator, Hotel Alpha 77. Status, discontinued 2008. Personnel records, classified in perpetuity under National Security Act provisions. She looked up at Rebecca. You were part of this. I was this, Agent Chen. For 5 years, I did not exist except as a series of file numbers and mission designators that will never see daylight. The woman sitting in front of you right now, the one accused of stolen valor, earned that trident in blood and sand in places so classified I cannot tell you their names even with you holding that authorization. Garrett leaned forward. In 2003, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld signed off on a pilot program. The objective was simple: Determine if female operators could perform at SEAL level in environments where male operators were compromised. Post-9/11 warfare required new approaches. We needed people who could move through populations where women were segregated, where male soldiers could not go, where intelligence gathering required a different kind of access. Bull Madsen spoke for the first time since entering the room. His voice was rough, scraped raw by grief and revelation. She saved my son's life in Fallujah, 2007. Your program sent her into a compound to extract a high-value target. The mission was compromised. My boy, Captain Ryan Madsen, he died holding the line so she could get out. Agent Chen looked between them, the old Marine with tears still wet on his face, the Admiral with his chest full of ribbons and his eyes full of secrets. Rebecca Stone sitting perfectly still, carrying the weight of 17 years like a stone in her chest. How many missions? Rebecca's voice was quiet, flat, the voice of someone reciting facts that had stopped being real a long time ago. 43 combat operations over 5 years. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. Places where American female operators could blend, could gather intelligence, could execute missions that male SEALs could not touch. I killed 28 hostile combatants. I extracted 17 high-value targets. I prevented 4 terrorist attacks on American soil that would have made 9/11 look like a preliminary strike. And nobody knows. That was the point, Agent. We were ghosts. We did not exist. Our successes were attributed to other units. Our failures were buried so deep, even we were not allowed to talk about them. When the program was shut down in 2008, we were given new identities and told to disappear. Some of us tried to build normal lives. Some of us could not. Garrett pulled out his phone, showed Chen a photograph. 6 women in training gear on a beach, soaked in sweat and salt water. Faces blurred by intentional pixelation, but bodies radiating exhaustion and determination. 6 candidates began ATHENA. 4 washed out during training. 2 graduated. Commander Stone was ATHENA 1. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Walsh was ATHENA 2. 3 weeks ago, Walsh was killed in what was staged to look like a car accident in Virginia. Brake line failure. But NCIS forensics found evidence of tampering. Someone is hunting them, has been for months. We believe there is a systematic effort to eliminate anyone with knowledge of the ATHENA program. 4 of the washouts have been approached by individuals claiming to be defense contractors or researchers. Someone is asking questions, gathering information, building a target list. Agent Chen's investigator instincts kicked in despite the shock. If this program was shut down 16 years ago, why start hunting the operators now? That is the question we are trying to answer. But tonight complicated everything. When Commander Stone was arrested, her photograph entered federal databases. Within minutes, that photo was leaked to hostile networks. We know because Lieutenant Marcus Stone, her son, appeared in a hostage video posted 18 minutes after his mother's arrest. The timeline is too tight to be coincidence. Chen felt ice in her stomach. You have a mole, someone with access to NCIS systems. We have a conspiracy, Agent. Someone who wants ATHENA operators dead or compromised. Someone with resources, patience, and access to classified information that should be impossible to obtain. And as of tonight, they know exactly where to find Commander Stone. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic outside. Chen looked at Rebecca, really looked at her, and saw past the calm exterior to the woman underneath. A mother whose son had been tortured for 6 months. A warrior whose cover had just been burned. A ghost who had been forced into the light and would now pay the price. What do you need from me? Garrett met her eyes. Your silence. Your cooperation. And if you are willing, your expertise. We need to find this mole before more people die. And we need to do it without alerting whoever's running this operation. Chen thought about her career. Thought about the rules she had spent 15 years following. Thought about the oath she had taken to uphold the law and protect the innocent. Then she thought about Rebecca Stone sitting in a veterans support group for 8 weeks, helping broken men put themselves back together, never asking for recognition or gratitude or even acknowledgement. Tell me what you need. Across town in a small apartment above a Chinese restaurant, Marcus Stone's face stared out from a laptop screen frozen on the last frame of the hostage video. The man watching it had seen the video 47 times in the past 3 hours. Each viewing revealed new details. The bruises on Marcus's face suggesting repeated beatings. the tremor in his hands indicating possible nerve damage from stress positions. The way his eyes tracked something off camera in the final seconds, suggesting his captors had shown him something to break his resistance. Colonel James Brewster, United States Army Special Forces, retired, currently CEO of Aegis Strategic Solutions, a private military contractor with offices in 12 countries, and annual revenue exceeding $400 million. 58 years old. Silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of man who had traded a uniform for a corner office, but still moved like someone who knew which end of a rifle to point at the enemy. He picked up his encrypted phone, dialed a number he had called once a month for the past 3 years. It rang twice before connecting. No voice on the other end, just silence and the faint hiss of a secure line. Athena 1 is exposed. Her son is in play. Are we proceeding with final phase? A pause, then a voice, male, old, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who had given orders that shaped history. Proceed, but I want her alive. The son is leverage. Use him. Brewster smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Understood. What about the collateral? Acceptable losses. This program should have stayed buried. The fact that it is surfacing now, that Congress is considering Athena 2.0, that is unacceptable. We need proof that female operators are liabilities. Stone and her son will provide that proof. One way or another, the line went dead. Brewster stood, walked to the window overlooking the San Diego harbor. Somewhere out there, Rebecca Stone was probably planning her next move, probably assembling a team, probably thinking she could outmaneuver a conspiracy that had been laying groundwork for 16 years. She had no idea how deep this went. How many people wanted Athena to stay dead? How much money was invested in keeping women out of Tier 1 special operations units, defense contracts, training programs, equipment manufacturers, an entire industry that profited from the status quo. And now she was going to learn that some ghosts should stay buried. Back at NCIS headquarters, Bull Madsen sat in a conference room nursing cold coffee and trying to process everything he had learned in the past 4 hours. His son had died saving a female Navy SEAL he never knew existed. That SEAL had spent 17 years honoring Ryan's memory in silence. And now her son was being used as bait to draw her into a trap that would likely kill them both. The door opened. Rebecca entered, followed by Admiral Garrett and Agent Chen. They looked tired, looked older than when they had started this night. Rebecca sat across from Bull, studied his face the way she probably studied terrain before a mission. Sergeant Major, you do not have to be part of this. What happens next is going to be dangerous, possibly illegal. Definitely outside any chain of command or rules of engagement you are familiar with. You have already done more than anyone could ask by listening. By understanding, you can walk away right now and nobody would blame you. Bull thought about Ryan, 24 years old forever. Thought about coming home from Vietnam to a country that called him baby killer. Thought about 30 years as a cop, seeing the worst humanity had to offer. Thought about his wife dying by inches from cancer while he held her hand and pretended everything would be okay. He thought about all the times he had wished for one more chance, one more mission, one more opportunity to make a difference that mattered. Ma'am, with respect, I already told you. This is my fight. Your son was willing to die for my boy. My boy did die for you. That creates an obligation that does not expire. Not after 17 years. Not after a lifetime. So whatever you are planning, whatever rules we are about to break, I am in. All the way. No reservations. Garrett nodded approval. Good, because we are going to need every advantage we can get. Agent Chen. Chen pulled up a map on the conference room screen. The port of San Diego. Dozens of piers, hundreds of ships, a maze of containers and warehouses and security blind spots. Based on analysis of the hostage video, we believe Lieutenant Stone is being held on a container ship currently docked at Pier 7. The vessel is Chinese flagged, registered to a shipping company that is a known front for intelligence operations. It arrived in port 6 days ago. Standard cargo inspection was waived due to diplomatic pressure. Bull leaned forward. How do we know he is there? Chen enhanced a portion of the frozen video. In the background, barely visible, a porthole window showed a partial view of San Diego Harbor. Specific buildings, specific angles. Computer analysis matched it to sight lines from only 3 locations in port. 2 are public access areas where holding a prisoner would be impossible. The third is the Dongfeng, a container vessel with crew quarters below deck that are not subject to Coast Guard inspection. Rebecca studied the image. How many hostiles? Conservative estimate based on crew manifest and intelligence reports, 12 to 15. All former military, Chinese special forces, Russian Spetsnaz, maybe some American contractors who went private. They are professional, they are prepared, and they are expecting you to come. Then we don't disappoint them. Garrett shook his head. Becca, this is a trap. They want you to attempt a rescue, probably planning to capture you, extract intelligence about Athena, then kill you both on camera to prove female operators are emotional liabilities who get people killed. Then we spring the trap on our terms. With what? We are 4 people. An old admiral with Alzheimer's, an aging Marine who has not seen combat in 50 years, an NCIS agent who is excellent at investigations but not exactly trained for hostage rescue, and you. 1 Athena operator against a dozen professional killers on a ship they control. The math does not work. Rebecca's smile was cold. The math never works, Admiral. It did not work in Fallujah when Ryan and I were outnumbered 6 to 1. It did not work in Kandahar when I extracted Daniel Cross and his Marines from an ambush with nothing but a rifle and bad attitude. The math is always wrong. That is why we do not trust it. Bull spoke up. Ma'am, I appreciate the confidence, but the Admiral is right. We need a real plan, not just courage and hope. I have a plan. Care to share it? Rebecca stood, walked to the whiteboard on the conference room wall, drew a quick sketch of a ship's layout from memory, marked positions with X's and arrows. Harbor Patrol does routine inspections. Agent Chen, can you get us Coast Guard credentials and uniforms? Chen hesitated. That is fraud, impersonating federal officers. If we get caught, it is prison time. If we do nothing, my son dies. And then they come for the other Athena candidates. And then this conspiracy stays buried for another generation while good people get killed protecting secrets that should have stayed dead. So yes, it is fraud. It is also necessary. Can you do it? Chen looked at Garrett. The Admiral nodded once. I can have everything ready in 6 hours, but we will need someone on the inside, someone who can disable security systems, create confusion, give you an opening. Rebecca pulled out her phone, made a call. It rang 4 times before a tired voice answered. This is Commander Vance. Jessica, it is Becca. A long pause, then a sharp intake of breath. Stone? Jesus, I heard you got arrested. I heard your cover was blown. It was, which means I do not have anything left to lose. But I need to know something, Jess. Are you the leak? Another pause, longer this time. Becca, I swear on my commission, I had nothing to do with what happened to Sarah Walsh. Nothing to do with your son's capture. I have been out of the life for 6 years. I run a desk now. I push paper. I do not run ops. But you still have access. You still have clearances. Yes, then I need your help. One last mission, for old time's sake, for Athena. The voice on the other end of the line was bitter. Athena got me assaulted twice during training. Athena got me passed over for promotion because I complained. Athena ruined my career by making me a diversity checkbox instead of a real officer. Why the hell would I help Athena now? Rebecca's voice softened. Because you are better than what they made you. Because you know the program was rigged from the start, but you tried anyway. Because somewhere under all that anger and bitterness is the woman who volunteered to be a ghost so that other women would not have to. I am not asking you to forgive the Navy, Jess. I am asking you to help me save my son. Silence on the line. In the background, faint sounds of television and city traffic. What do you need? Access codes for the Port of San Diego security grid. Just for 2 hours. Just for Pier 7. Can you do that without triggering alarms? Jessica's voice shifted, became more businesslike. I still have system administrator credentials from my time running port security operations 3 years ago. Nobody ever revoked them when I transferred to desk work. Bureaucratic oversight. I have been keeping them active as insurance in case I ever needed leverage. The codes rotate every 6 hours, but I can access the master key generator. It will take me about 45 minutes to set up the glitch pattern and pull the current codes without leaving fingerprints in the access logs. Becca, if this goes wrong, if they trace it back to me, my career is over. My pension is gone. I go to Leavenworth. If this goes wrong, we all go to Leavenworth. Or more likely, we go to unmarked graves and our families never know what happened. So the question is not whether you will risk your career. The question is whether you can live with yourself if you do nothing and my son dies because you were too afraid to help. More silence. Then a sound that might have been crying or might have been bitter laughter. Give me 1 hour. I will send you everything you need. codes, camera blind spots, guard rotation schedules. But Stone, when this is over, when you have your son back, you do something for me. Name it. You burn Athena. You expose every lie, every betrayal, every officer who used us as experiments and then threw us away. You make sure the truth comes out. All of it, even the parts that make us look bad, especially those parts. Because the only thing worse than being a failed experiment is being a secret failed experiment that nobody learns from. I promise. The line went dead. Bull had been listening to the whole conversation. Now he looked at Rebecca with new understanding. She got hurt by the program. They all did. But she is still helping you. Rebecca nodded. That is what warriors do, Sergeant Major. We protect each other even when the system fails us. Even when we have every reason to walk away. It is not about the institution. It is about the people beside you in the fight. Garrett checked his watch. We have 6 hours until the access codes arrive. I suggest we use that time to get equipment, brief the plan, and prepare for every contingency. Because once we step onto that ship, there is no calling for backup, no cavalry coming over the hill, just 4 people who are too old and too stubborn to let an innocent man die. Agent Chen pulled up a shipping manifest on her laptop. What about weapons? I can access the NCIS armory, but there will be questions. Rebecca opened a locked cabinet in the corner of the conference room that nobody had noticed. Inside were rifles, pistols, body armor, and enough tactical gear to outfit a small strike team. She saw their expressions and shrugged. Admiral Garrett maintained certain resources for off-the-books operations, things that were never officially signed out and therefore cannot officially go missing. Garrett's smile was grim. 38 years in special warfare teaches you to keep insurance policies. The Navy does not know about this cash. Nobody does except Becca, and now you two. Bull picked up one of the rifles, HK-416, the same weapon SEAL teams used. He checked the action, felt the familiar weight, muscle memory from Vietnam coming back despite 50 years of distance. This is really happening. We are really doing this. Rebecca met his eyes. Last chance to back out, Sergeant Major. No shame in it. You have already given more than most. Bull thought about Ryan one more time. Thought about his son's last moments holding a line against impossible odds. Thought about 17 years of visiting a grave and wondering if it had meant something. Now he knew. Now he understood. And now he had a chance to honor that sacrifice by saving another mother's son. He chambered around, safed the weapon, looked at Rebecca with absolute certainty. Semper Fi, Commander. Let us go get your boy. The next 6 hours passed in preparation that felt like ceremony. They stripped weapons, checked magazines, rehearsed entry procedures and fallback positions. Bull moved through the motions with hands that remembered, with muscles that had done this before in jungles half a world away against an enemy that wanted him dead just as badly as these contractors would. Agent Chen struggled more. She could shoot. Her NCIS qualification scores were excellent, but shooting at paper targets in controlled conditions was very different from shooting at people who were shooting back. Rebecca spent an hour walking her through combat breathing, muscle memory drills, the mental preparation that turned fear into focus. You do not have to kill anyone, Agent. You provide covering fire. You watch our backs. You make noise and confusion. The actual fighting, that is for people who have done it before. And if someone comes at me directly, then you put rounds center mass until the threat stops moving. No hesitation, no second guessing. You protect yourself and your team. Everything else is noise. Garrett spent the time on encrypted phone calls to contacts whose names he did not share, calling in favors, arranging contingencies, making sure that if everything went wrong, if they all died on that ship, at least the truth about Athena would come out. At least their deaths would mean something. At 11:30 p.m., Rebecca's phone chimed. Text message from Commander Vance. Access codes. Security grid for Pier 7 would show system maintenance from midnight to 0200 hours. 2-hour window. After that, alarms would trigger and federal response would be immediate. Bull checked his watch. That gives us 120 minutes to infiltrate, locate Lieutenant Stone, neutralize hostiles, and extract. That is not a lot of time. It is more than I had in Fallujah when your son gave me 90 seconds. We work with what we have. They loaded into a black SUV that Garrett had arranged through channels nobody questioned. Drove through San Diego streets that were quiet at this hour. Bull watched the city slide past the window and thought about all the normal people sleeping in their homes. Families, children, people who would never know that four people were about to risk everything to save one man and expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government. That was fine. That was how it should be. Some people slept peacefully because others stood guard in the dark. Some people lived normal lives because others were willing to do abnormal things to protect them. That was the bargain. That was the oath. That was the reason Ryan had charged an enemy position alone while his brothers escaped. That was the reason Rebecca had spent 5 years as a ghost. That was the reason they were driving toward almost certain death with nothing but faith and firepower to see them through. The port of San Diego loomed ahead, chain link fences, security lights, container stacks rising like steel mountains against the night sky. Somewhere in that maze of metal and darkness, Marcus Stone was waiting, praying, maybe giving up hope. But hope was coming. Hope in the form of a mother who would burn the world down to save her son. Hope in the form of an old Marine who owed a 17-year debt. Hope in the form of an admiral who refused to let good people die for bad secrets. Hope with guns and body armor and absolutely nothing left to lose. Rebecca checked her weapon one final time, looked at Bull, at Chen, at Garrett. Remember, we go in quiet. We locate Marcus. We extract. If shooting starts, we make every round count because we will not get resupply. If anyone goes down, we do not leave them. We all come home or none of us do. Questions? Bull shook his head. Chen looked terrified but determined. Garrett just smiled that dangerous smile. Then let us go to work. They exited the vehicle 2 blocks from Pier 7, moved through shadows, harbor patrol uniforms fitting reasonably well despite being borrowed, credentials that would pass casual inspection, the confidence of people who belonged there and knew exactly what they were doing. The Dongfeng rose above them like a sleeping giant, 800 feet of steel and cargo containers. Crew quarters below, bridge above, and somewhere in between, a 30-year-old Navy SEAL who had not seen his mother in 2 years and probably believed every lie his captors had fed him about who she really was. Rebecca stood at the base of the gangway, looked up at the ship, felt the weight of the moment settle over her like a familiar coat. This was it. This was where 17 years of hiding ended, where the ghost became real again, where a mother chose her son over everything else and damned the consequences. She took the first step onto the gangway. Bull followed, then Chen, then Garrett bringing up the rear. 4 people climbing toward darkness, toward violence, toward truth. The ship's deck, it was quiet. Too quiet. The guard who should have been posted at the gangway was missing. Security cameras that should have been tracking their approach hung dark and dead. Commander Vance's access codes had worked. They were invisible for the next 90 minutes. But something felt wrong. Rebecca's instincts, honed by 43 missions and 5 years of operating in hostile territory, screamed warnings she could not articulate. This was too easy, too clean. She signaled the team. Weapons up. Tight formation. They moved toward the superstructure that housed crew quarters. Every step measured, every corner cleared. Professional. Precise. The door to the crew quarters was unlocked. Beyond it, stairs descended into darkness. Somewhere below, hostile forces waited. Somewhere below, Marcus Stone prayed for rescue he probably did not believe would come. Rebecca descended into shadow, into the place where ghosts lived, into the moment that would define everything that came after. Behind her, 3 people who should have been enjoying retirement followed without hesitation, without question, without anything but absolute faith that this was right. And in the darkness ahead, the trap waited to spring. The stairwell descended into darkness that smelled of diesel fuel and rust and something else. Fear, maybe. Or blood. Hard to tell the difference after enough years in this business. Rebecca Stone moved down the metal steps with her weapon up, each footfall silent despite the grated steel underfoot. Behind her, Bull Madsen breathed steady and controlled, his rifle tracking angles the way muscle memory demanded, even after 50 years away from combat. Then Agent Chen, trying to match their pace, trying not to think about the fact that she had never actually shot anyone outside a training range. Admiral Garrett brought up the rear, older than the rest, but moving with the certainty of a man who had done this dance 1,000 times before his body started betraying him. The corridor at the bottom stretched in both directions. Bare bulbs every 20 feet casting pools of yellow light, separated by shadows deep enough to hide anything. To the left, the passage led toward the engine room. Throbbing machinery, Noise that would cover movement but also mask approaching threats. To the right, crew quarters. Smaller spaces. Places where you could pin a man down and make him answer questions he did not want to answer. Rebecca signaled right. They moved as a unit. 4 people who had no business being here. 4 people who were here anyway because sometimes duty mattered more than sense. The first door they tried was unlocked. Storage room, cleaning supplies, mops and buckets, and industrial-strength chemicals. Nothing useful except the confirmation that the ship's crew was not concerned about security below deck. Why would they be? They owned this space. They controlled access. They had no reason to expect 4 people stupid enough to walk into a trap with their eyes wide open. Second door, crew quarters. 6 bunks stacked 3 high. Personal effects scattered on small shelves. Photographs of families back home. A worn Bible in what looked like Russian. These were not faceless enemies. These were men with lives and people who would mourn them. Rebecca had learned a long time ago not to think about that too hard. You did the mission. You dealt with the guilt later, or you did not deal with it at all, and it ate you alive in small pieces over years and decades. Bull cleared the room with practiced efficiency, checked the heads, the lockers, under the bunks, nothing. Third door, fourth, fifth, empty crew quarters and storage spaces and 1 small galley that smelled like old coffee and cigarettes. No guards, no prisoners, no Marcus. Too quiet. Bull's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried everything he was thinking. This is wrong. Where are the guards? Where is anybody? Rebecca held up a fist. The team froze. She tilted her head, listening. There, faint but unmistakable. Footsteps on metal. Multiple people, moving with purpose, coming from somewhere ahead and above. They were being herded. She realized it all at once. The unlocked doors, the empty corridors, the complete absence of security. Commander Vance's access codes had worked too well. The security grid was not just disabled, it was being manipulated. Whoever controlled this ship knew exactly where they were, knew exactly where they were going, and was moving pieces into position for something Rebecca could not quite see yet. We need to fall back. Her voice was calm despite the ice forming in her chest. This is a kill box. They are pushing us somewhere. Admiral Garrett's response came through the tactical radio they had rigged before entering the ship. Negative. We came from Marcus. We do not leave without him. Sir, if we push forward into a prepared ambush, we all die and Marcus dies anyway. Better to extract, reassess, come back with a better plan. There is no time for better plans, Commander. You heard the video. They are going to execute him. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. We are here now. We have access now. We finish this now. Rebecca wanted to argue, wanted to pull rank, except Garrett technically outranked her, even retired. Wanted to use logic and training and 15 years of operational experience that all screamed retreat when the tactical situation turned bad. But she also wanted her son back. Wanted it so badly that her judgment was compromised. Wanted it enough to ignore every instinct that had kept her alive through 43 missions in places where mistakes meant body bags. Bull put his hand on her shoulder. Gentle, grounding. She saved my son once. Maybe it is time I repaid that debt. Your boy is here somewhere. Let us go find him. The words hit harder than any order could have. This was not about tactics anymore. This was about honor, about debts that transcended logic, about old men who had nothing left to prove except that they could still stand when it mattered. Rebecca nodded once. Forward, weapons tight. First sign of ambush, we go loud and fast. No mercy, no hesitation. They moved deeper into the ship. The corridor opened into a wider space. The cargo hold. Containers stacked 20 feet high, creating a maze of steel walls and narrow passages. Dim work lights casting long shadows. The kind of terrain that made Rebecca's skin crawl because you could not clear it properly. Too many angles, too many places for threats to hide. Too many ways to die. A sound, metal on metal, faint, rhythmic, like someone tapping or chains rattling. Rebecca followed the sound through the container maze. Left, right, straight, another right. The tapping got louder, more insistent, desperate. She rounded a corner and there he was. Marcus Stone, 30 years old, Navy SEAL, her son, chained to a support beam in the center of a small clearing created by the container arrangement. His face was bruised, Dried blood crusted around his nose and mouth. His uniform was torn and filthy, but his eyes were alert, focused. When he saw Rebecca, those eyes went wide with something between hope and horror. "Mom," his voice was hoarse, damaged from screaming or dehydration or both. "Mom, it is a trap. You need to go. Right now, they are waiting for you." Rebecca moved forward anyway, scanning the containers above and around them, looking for the ambush she knew was coming. Bull covered left, Chen covered right. Garrett watched their six. "I know it is a trap, baby, but I am not leaving without you." She reached him, started examining the chains, military-grade shackles, hardened steel. No way to break them without tools. She pulled a small bolt cutter from her pack, started working on the first link. Marcus was shaking his head. "You do not understand. They told me everything. About Athena, about how you got Marines killed, about how the program was shut down because female operators could not handle the pressure, about how you are the reason Dad left, the reason our family fell apart." Rebecca kept working the bolt cutters, pressure on the handles, the chain resisting, her arms burning with effort. "They lied to you, Marcus, about all of it. Athena was sabotaged from the inside. We succeeded despite people trying to make us fail. And your father left because I chose the mission over family too many times. That part is true. That part I own. But I never got anyone killed through incompetence. Only through the hard choices combat forces on you." The chain snapped. She moved to the second shackle. Marcus looked past her, looked at Bull. "Who are you?" Bull met the young man's eyes. "Sergeant Major William Madsen, United States Marine Corps. My son died in Fallujah in 2007, holding a defensive position so your mother could complete her mission. She has been honoring his memory ever since. So when she got arrested trying to help veterans and you showed up in a hostage video, I decided it was time to repay the debt." The second chain broke. Marcus was free. He stood on shaky legs. Rebecca caught him as he stumbled, held him upright, felt how thin he had become. 6 months of captivity, 6 months of torture and psychological warfare designed to break him. But he was alive. He was here. She had him. "Can you walk? I can run if we need to." "We need to?" Lights flooded on. Brilliant white halogens mounted on the containers above them, blinding after the dimness. Rebecca's tactical instincts screamed. She pushed Marcus down, brought her rifle up. Bull and Chen and Garrett formed a defensive perimeter. 4 people back-to-back in the center of a kill box with nowhere to run. A voice echoed through the cargo hold, amplified, coming from speakers mounted somewhere above. "Touching reunion, Lieutenant Commander Stone. But you really should have listened to your son. This is exactly where we wanted you." Colonel James Brewster appeared on a catwalk 30 feet above them. Silver hair, tactical vest, surrounded by 8 men in full combat gear. Professional contractors. The kind of mercenaries who sold their skills to whoever paid best and asked fewest questions. Each one carried automatic weapons. Each one had the high ground and clear fields of fire. Rebecca did not bother pointing her rifle at them. At this range, with their position advantage, any shooting would end with her team dead in seconds. So she lowered her weapon, showed empty hands, played for time. "Brewster, should have known you would want to watch this personally." Brewster smiled. It was the smile of a man who had won and knew it. "I have been planning this for 3 years, Commander. Ever since I learned that Athena might be resurrected. Ever since politicians started talking about expanding female roles in special operations. I needed proof that the program was a failure. That female operators were emotional liabilities who got real warriors killed. Your death here tonight, trying to rescue your son, ignoring tactical sense because of maternal instinct, that is exactly the proof I need." Bull's voice cut through the space, cold, flat, dangerous. "You are doing this for a defense contract. You are killing American service members for money." Brewster's expression hardened. "I am saving lives, old man. Every female operator in a SEAL team is a weak link, a vulnerability, a walking disaster waiting to happen. Your son died because Athena 1 was on that mission, because the program existed, because politicians played social justice games with our military. I am making sure that never happens again." Rebecca's hands were steady, but her voice carried an edge that could cut steel. "Ryan Madsen died because you fed us bad intelligence, because someone sabotaged the mission. We have been investigating Athena's operational history, every mission that went wrong, every compromise, every near disaster. They all trace back to intelligence failures that came from inside channels, from people with access, from people like you. Brewster's smile never wavered. Prove it. I will. Right after I get my son out of here. You are not leaving, Commander. None of you are. In approximately 5 minutes, my men are going to open fire. You will die defending your son. Your team will die to defending you. It will all be captured on video. And tomorrow morning, that video will be delivered to every member of Congress, every defense committee, every news organization in the country. America will see what happens when female operators let emotion override training, when maternal instinct compromises tactical judgment, when diversity initiatives get real warriors killed. Marcus tried to stand. Rebecca pushed him back down, kept herself between her son and the weapons above. Agent Chen spoke for the first time since entering the ship. Her voice shook but held. Colonel Brewster, I am a federal agent. You are confessing to conspiracy, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Every word you just said is being recorded. Brewster laughed. On what? Your body camera? Your phone? Both of which are being jammed by equipment my people installed before you ever entered this ship. There is no recording, Agent. There is no evidence. There is just you dying alongside a failed experiment and the men stupid enough to help her. Admiral Garrett stepped forward. One step. That was all. But something in his posture made Brewster's contractors shift nervously. This was a man who had commanded SEAL teams in combat, who had planned operations that changed the course of wars, who had forgotten more about tactical combat than most of these mercenaries would ever learn. Son, I have been in this business for 40 years. I have planned missions in every theater of war America has touched since Vietnam, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that you made 3 critical mistakes tonight. Brewster's smile faded slightly. Enlighten me, Admiral. First mistake, you assumed we came alone. Second mistake, you assumed Commander Vance's access codes were the only ones we have. Third mistake, you are talking when you should be shooting, which tells me you are stalling, which tells me you are waiting for something, which tells me you are not as in control of this situation as you think you are. Brewster's face went cold. Kill them now. The contractors raised their weapons. Rebecca grabbed Marcus and dove behind a container. Bull did the same, dragging Chen with him. Garrett dropped and rolled, moving with speed that defied his age. Gunfire erupted, not from above, from behind, from containers on the opposite side of the cargo hold. Suppressed weapons, professional, controlled. 3-round bursts finding targets with precision that spoke of serious training. Brewster's contractors scattered. 2 went down in the first volley. The rest took cover on the catwalk, returned fire toward the new threat. The cargo hold became a war zone, bullets ricocheting off steel, the smell of gunpowder and fear. Rebecca risked a glance around the container, saw figures moving through the maze, tactical gear, night vision, professional movement. For half a heartbeat, she thought they were Brewster's reinforcements. Then she saw the insignia on their shoulders. SEAL Team 3. The lead operator dropped next to her position, removed his helmet. It was Captain Daniel Cross, Admiral Garrett's son, the Marine officer Rebecca had saved in Kandahar 15 years ago. 42 years old now. Silver oak leaves on his collar. A chest full of ribbons earned in places most Americans would never hear about. Commander Stone, your father said you might need backup. Rebecca looked at Admiral Garrett. The old man was grinning like a kid who just pulled off the perfect prank. You called your son. I called my son. He called his team. They were staged 3 blocks away in case things went sideways, which they very obviously have. Daniel's SEAL team moved through the cargo hold like smoke. 8 operators, the best trained warriors America could produce. They cleared positions with brutal efficiency. 2 more contractors went down. The rest retreated toward the bridge. Brewster disappeared through a hatch, running now that the tactical situation had reversed. Daniel helped Rebecca to her feet. We need to move. My orders are to extract you and your team. Then we sanitize this ship before harbor security realizes there is a firefight happening. What about Brewster? Already being handled. FBI has teams surrounding the port. He is not getting off the ship. Rebecca looked at Marcus, her son, alive, free, staring at the SEAL team with confusion and something like awe. Marcus, this is Captain Cross. His father is Admiral Garrett. I saved his life in Kandahar. He just returned the favor. Marcus's voice was weak but determined. Mom, I owe you an apology for everything I said, everything I believed. They showed me reports, video, evidence that you were a traitor. I believed them because I wanted to believe them. Because I was angry you chose the Navy over me. Rebecca pulled him into an embrace. No apologies. You survived 6 months of psychological torture designed to break you. The fact that you are still sane, still able to think clearly, that is a victory. We deal with the rest later. Bull approached, put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. Your mother is one of the toughest people I have ever met, son. And I fought in Vietnam. Trust me when I say you have nothing to be ashamed of. Who are you again? A man who owes your mother a debt I can never fully repay. Now let us get you out of here before the shooting starts again. Agent Chen looked shell-shocked. She had been shot in the leg. She was bleeding. She was in pain. She was scared. She was alone. She was in a dark alley. 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 Oh, she was in a dark alley. 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 She was in a dark. Agent Chen looked shell-shocked. She had fired her weapon twice. Had no idea if she hit anything. Was shaking so hard she could barely hold her rifle. You did good, Agent. Bull's voice was gentle. First firefight is always rough, but you stood your ground. You did not run. That is what matters. I almost got us killed. I froze for at least 5 seconds when they opened fire. 5 seconds of freezing, followed by action, is better than 5 minutes of cowardice, followed by nothing. You will learn. We all had to learn. They reached the deck. Night air, cold, clean, free of gunpowder smoke and fear. Harbor lights reflecting off dark water. In the distance, police sirens, federal vehicles. The FBI raid that Daniel had mentioned. Rebecca stood at the railing, breathed deep, felt the adrenaline starting to fade, felt the crash coming. 6 hours of planning, 2 hours of infiltration, 15 minutes of combat. And now it was over. Marcus was safe. Brewster was trapped. The conspiracy was breaking open. But something nagged at her. Something Brewster had said about being planned for 3 years, about needing proof that Athena was a failure, about delivering video to Congress. She turned to Daniel. Your father said someone has been hunting Athena operators, killing them, making it look like accidents. We thought Brewster was behind it, but he wanted me alive. Wanted video of me dying trying to rescue Marcus. So who killed Sarah Walsh? Daniel's expression went grim. We have been investigating that. NCIS, FBI, Naval Intelligence all working together. We found something 3 days ago. Something that connects all the deaths, all the compromised missions, all the sabotage that plagued Athena from the beginning. What? Not what. Who? Someone inside the Pentagon. Someone with enough rank to access classified programs. Enough influence to bury investigations. Enough connections to hire contractors like Brewster. Someone who has been working for 16 years to make sure Athena stayed dead and buried. Rebecca's blood went cold. Who? General Douglas Hartman, United States Marine Corps, retired, currently senior defense advisor, sits on multiple oversight committees, has the ear of half the Joint Chiefs, and according to intercepted communications, has been running a systematic campaign to eliminate any evidence that female operators could succeed at SEAL level. Admiral Garrett's face went pale. Doug Hartman, I served with him in Vietnam. He saved my life in Khe Sanh. He is a legend, a hero, the man who helped create modern SEAL training. He is also the man who sabotaged ATHENA, sir, who got Ryan Madsen killed by feeding bad intelligence, who had Sarah Walsh murdered when she started asking questions, who has been paying Brewster and others like him to make sure female combat integration fails. Bull's voice was quiet but deadly. Why would a decorated general betray his own people? Daniel pulled out a tablet, showed them financial records, bank transfers, shell companies, payments from defense contractors to offshore accounts controlled by Hartman. Millions of dollars over 15 years. Money, ideology, control. Take your pick. Hartman is on record opposing female combat integration. He has testified before Congress multiple times arguing that women cannot handle special operations. And he has received substantial consulting fees from companies that profit when the status quo is maintained. Training facilities that only handle male candidates. Equipment manufacturers with male-focused designs. An entire industry built on gender segregation in elite units. Rebecca stared at the records, felt rage building, cold, focused. The kind of anger that burned away everything else and left only purpose. Where is he now? Washington, D.C., scheduled to testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee in 4 days. He is going to use ATHENA as proof that female integration was tried and failed. He has prepared evidence, false reports, doctored after action reviews, all designed to show that women are emotional liabilities who get men killed. Then we stop him. Commander, he is a 4-star general. Even retired, he has connections we cannot touch, influence we cannot counter. If we try to expose him without ironclad proof, he will bury us. I have proof, Rebecca's voice was flat. Absolute. I have mission logs that contradict his false reports. I have DNA evidence from Syria that proves he leaked our position to hostiles. I have 16 years of watching my back and documenting every suspicious death, every coincidence, every mission that went wrong in ways that benefited people who wanted ATHENA to fail. I have built a case because I knew someday someone would try this. I just never thought it would be him. Admiral Garrett sat heavily on a deck box, looked older suddenly, looked like a man who had just learned his hero was a villain, his friend was a traitor. Everything he believed about honor and loyalty and brotherhood was built on foundations that were crumbling. How do we do this? We testify at his hearing in front of Congress and cameras and the entire world. We tell the truth about ATHENA, all of it, the successes he buried, the lives we saved, the attacks we prevented, and we make him answer for every lie, every death, every betrayal. That will destroy careers, Becca. Mine, yours. Everyone who knew about ATHENA and stayed silent. The blowback will be massive. Good. Let it burn. Let every corrupt officer who put politics over people face consequences. Let every contractor who profited from our failure answer for it. Let the whole rotten system collapse so something better can grow from the ashes. Bull spoke up. Ma'am, I am with you, whatever it takes, but we need to be smart about this. Hartman has had 16 years to prepare his defense. We have 4 days to build a case strong enough to overcome his credibility and his connections. Then we better get started. Marcus stood on shaky legs, looked at his mother with new eyes. Eyes that saw past 17 years of anger and abandonment to the woman underneath. The warrior who had sacrificed everything for duty. The mother who had just walked into a trap to save him. The legend who was about to risk everything one more time to expose corruption that reached into the highest levels of power. Mom, I want to help. I want to testify. Marcus, you have been through hell. You need medical attention, rest, time to process. I need to make things right. They used me to hurt you, used my anger against you, used my doubts about your choices to turn me into a weapon. I want to stand beside you when you bring Hartman down. I want to look him in the eye and tell him he failed, that we are still here, still fighting, still refusing to quit. Rebecca looked at her son, saw Ryan in him, saw herself, saw the kind of courage that came not from fearlessness, but from being terrified and doing it anyway. Then we do it together. Mother and son, Marine and SEAL, Athena and everyone she protected. We walk into that hearing room and we tell the truth. Agent Chen stepped forward. I am coming too. My sister died working with Athena, Major Elena Martinez. She was Navy intelligence. Liaison to your program. She was killed 2 years ago in what was ruled a training accident, but the circumstances never made sense. She was too good, too careful. Now I know why she died, and I want Hartman to answer for it. Admiral Garrett stood, straightened his uniform, looked like the warrior he had been before age, and disease started claiming him piece by piece. Then we have 4 days to prepare, 4 days to gather evidence, 4 days to build a case that will withstand the scrutiny of Congress and the fury of a 4-star general who thought he could bury the truth forever. Bull chambered a round in his rifle, safed it, looked at the harbor lights reflecting off dark water. 4 days. We have faced worse odds. Rebecca thought about Fallujah, about Ryan Madsen giving her 90 seconds, about 17 years of living in the shadows, about all the missions where the math did not work and they succeeded anyway because sometimes courage mattered more than numbers. She looked at her team, an old admiral with Alzheimer's who forgot things but never forgot duty, an aging Marine who had not fired his weapon in anger for 50 years but still knew how to stand when it counted, an NCIS agent whose sister had died keeping secrets and who was ready to risk everything for truth, a son who had been tortured and broken but still chose honor over hatred, and herself, Athena 1, the ghost who was tired of hiding, the mother who had chosen duty over family too many times and was finally ready to choose both, the warrior who understood that some battles were worth fighting even when you knew the cost would be everything. We do not have to win, we just have to survive long enough to tell the truth. That is all we have ever done. Survive, adapt, overcome, and refuse to quit no matter how bad the odds. Semper Fi, Commander. Semper Fi, Sergeant Major. They walked off the ship together, into the lights of federal vehicles and FBI agents, into questions they could not yet answer and investigations that would take months, into the beginning of the end of Athena's silence. Behind them, Colonel Brewster was being led away in handcuffs. His contractors were dead or captured. His conspiracy was unraveling. But he was smiling, because he knew what they knew. The real fight was not here, was not tonight. The real fight was in 4 days, in a Senate hearing room, against a 4-star general who had spent 16 years preparing to destroy them, against a system that did not want the truth, against history itself. But they had something the general did not have. They had survived. They had each other, and they had absolutely nothing left to lose. 4 days to change everything. 4 days to honor every ghost who had served in silence. 4 days to prove that sometimes the greatest warriors are the ones nobody knows exist until the moment they step into the light and refuse to back down. The war was not over. It was just beginning. And this time the ghosts were done hiding. The Senate Armed Services Committee hearing room was built to intimidate. Marble columns rising 30 feet to a ceiling decorated with eagles and flags and symbols of American power. Brass nameplates gleaming under television lights. Rows of seats for spectators already filling with reporters and military brass, and people whose careers would be decided by what happened in the next 4 hours. The air smelled like old leather and furniture polish, and the particular tension that comes when truth is about to collide with power. Rebecca Stone sat at the witness table wearing her Navy dress uniform for the first time in 3 years. The ribbons on her chest told a story most people could not read. Combat Action Ribbon, Navy Cross, Purple Heart with 2 oak leaf clusters, Bronze Star with V device for valor. A career's worth of decorations earned in places she still could not name in front of cameras. Her hands were folded on the table, steady, no tremor, no sign of the fear that was eating her from the inside. To her left sat Marcus, also in dress uniform, SEAL Trident gleaming, face still showing faint bruises from 6 months of captivity, but jaw set with determination that made him look older than 30. He had spent 4 days in debriefings, medical evaluations, psychological assessments. The doctors wanted him in a hospital. He wanted to be here, wanted to face the man who had orchestrated his torture. To her right sat Bull Madsen, Marine Corps dress blues, chest full of ribbons from a war most of these senators had been too young to remember. Purple Hearts, Bronze Star, the kind of decorations you only earned by bleeding on foreign soil. He had not worn this uniform in 40 years, had to have it let out around the middle. But he wore it now because some moments demanded you show up in full regalia and remind people what you had sacrificed for the right to speak. Behind them in the gallery sat Admiral Thomas Garrett, dress whites, 4 stars, enough ribbons to cover most of his chest. Next to him, Captain Daniel Cross in SEAL dress uniform, Agent Sarah Chen in a dark suit, her NCIS credentials visible on her lapel, and scattered through the audience, other faces Rebecca recognized, former ATHENA candidates, veterans from the support group, reporters who had been digging into classified programs for years waiting for something like this to break into the open. At the front of the room, elevated above everyone else like judges at trial, sat the 12 senators of the Armed Services Committee, 6 Democrats, 6 Republicans, all of them career politicians who had spent decades navigating military politics and defense budgets. All of them about to hear testimony that would force them to take positions that could end careers or make reputations depending on which way the wind blew. And at the opposing witness table, separated from Rebecca by 20 feet of polished floor that might as well have been a battlefield, sat General Douglas Hartman, 71 years old, 4 stars even in retirement, silver hair cut high and tight in the style he had worn since enlisting in 1970, face like carved granite, eyes like blue ice, chest absolutely covered in ribbons spanning 5 decades of service, Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, Gulf War, Afghanistan, Iraq, a warrior's resume that read like American military history, Medal of Honor for actions in Khe Sanh, Navy Cross, distinguished service medals from 4 different administrations. The kind of man who walked into rooms and senators stood up automatically. He had not looked at Rebecca once since entering, had not acknowledged her presence, had settled into his chair like a king taking his throne, and waited for the proceedings to begin with absolute confidence that he would walk out of this room with his reputation intact and hers in ruins. Senator Patricia Owens called the hearing to order, 62 years old, former Navy JAG officer, first woman to chair this committee. She had seen enough military politics to know when something smelled wrong and had been quietly gathering evidence for 3 weeks. Now she was ready to burn down anyone who had betrayed the uniform she still honored. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to examine the ATHENA Initiative, a classified program that ran from 2003 to 2008 with the objective of testing female operators in special operations environments. This hearing will determine whether the program succeeded or failed, whether it should be reviewed or permanently discontinued, and whether anyone involved violated their oath, their duty, or the law. She looked directly at Hartman. General Hartman, you have submitted extensive testimony arguing that ATHENA was a failure, that female operators proved incapable of SEAL-level performance, that the program resulted in operational compromises and American casualties. You have prepared detailed evidence to support these claims. Is that correct? Hartman's voice was smooth, confident, the voice of a man who had briefed presidents and testified before Congress dozens of times. That is correct, Madam Chairwoman. I have spent 3 years compiling evidence from classified mission reports, after action reviews, and personnel evaluations. The data is clear. ATHENA was well-intentioned but fundamentally flawed. Women lacked the physical strength, emotional control, and psychological resilience required for Tier 1 special operations. The program put American lives at risk and resulted in at least one confirmed KMEA that could have been prevented. Owens turned to Rebecca. Commander Stone, you were designated ATHENA 1. You completed the full training program and served for 5 years on active operations. You have submitted testimony directly contradicting General Hartman's claims. Would you like to respond? Rebecca stood, not because protocol required it, but because Bull had taught her over the past 4 days that when you challenge a 4-star general in front of Congress, you do it on your feet like a warrior. Madam Chairwoman, General Hartman's evidence is fabricated. His mission reports are doctored. His after-action reviews contradict the original documentation that I have provided to this committee. And his claim about American casualties is a lie built on top of a crime he committed 16 years ago. The room went silent. Reporters leaned forward. Cameras zoomed in. Senators exchanged glances. You did not call a Medal of Honor recipient a liar in public without proof that could withstand nuclear scrutiny. Hartman's expression never changed. Strong words, Commander. I assume you have evidence to support such serious allegations? Rebecca opened the folder in front of her, pulled out the first document, held it up for the cameras. Operation Crimson Sand, November 2007, Fallujah, Iraq. Your official after-action review states that ATHENA-1 compromised the mission through tactical errors that resulted in the death of Captain Ryan Madsen, United States Marine Corps. Is that correct? Hartman nodded. That is what the evidence shows. Rebecca pulled out a second document. This is the original after-action review filed by the ground commander, Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson, written 6 hours after the operation concluded. It states, and I quote, ATHENA-1 performed exceptionally under fire, completed primary and secondary objectives despite intelligence failure that compromised our position. Captain Madsen K. during heroic rearguard action that saved 4 American lives. Recommend ATHENA-1 for Navy Cross. She laid both documents side by side on the desk. Your version was filed 6 months later, after Lieutenant Colonel Patterson retired, after the original mission reports were classified at a level that made them inaccessible to oversight, after you had time to rewrite history. Owens leaned forward. General Hartman, can you explain the discrepancy? Hartman's voice remained calm, but something flickered behind his eyes. The original report was filed under combat conditions. My review was compiled after thorough investigation with access to intelligence the ground commander did not possess. Sometimes initial assessments are incomplete. Bull Madsen stood, his voice carried across the room with the authority of a man who had buried his only son and spent 17 years living with questions that were finally getting answers. General Hartman, I am Sergeant Major William Madsen, United States Marine Corps, retired. Ryan Madsen was my son. For 17 years I have wondered why he died, what his sacrifice meant, whether it mattered. Now I learn that you rewrote the record of his death to serve a political agenda. You dishonored his memory to prove a point about women in combat. You turned his heroism into a lie. The room erupted, senators calling for order, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing. Owens hammered her gavel until the noise subsided. Sergeant Major Madsen, you will have opportunity to testify, but please be seated. Bull remained standing, met Hartman's eyes across 20 feet of marble floor. My son died saving Commander Stone, died holding a line so she could complete a mission you sabotaged with bad intelligence. You got him killed, General, and then you used his death to justify your crusade against women serving their country. That is not honor, that is murder. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Hartman's face went red. His hands gripped the table edge. That is slander, Sergeant Major. I have dedicated 50 years to serving this nation. I will not sit here and be accused of murder by some retired cop who does not understand the complexity of special operations. Bull's smile was cold. I understand complexity just fine, General. I understand that you have received $3.2 million in consulting fees from defense contractors who profit when female integration programs fail. I understand that you sit on the boards of 4 companies that provide SEAL training and equipment exclusively designed for male operators. I understand that your financial interest in keeping women out of special operations is documented in bank records that Agent Chen has provided to this committee. Agent Chen stood in the gallery, held up a thick folder. Madam Chairwoman, I have compiled financial records showing systematic payments from defense industry sources to shell companies controlled by General Hartman. The timeline correlates directly with his testimony before Congress opposing female combat integration. He has been paid to maintain the status quo. Hartman stood now, voice rising. This is a witch hunt, a conspiracy by people who want to destroy traditional military values. Commander Stone was part of a failed experiment. She is bitter about it. She has manufactured evidence and recruited accomplices to salvage her reputation at my expense. Marcus Stone stood. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. General Hartman, you had me tortured for 6 months. Your people, working through Colonel Brewster, captured me in Syria and spent half a year breaking me down psychologically. They showed me fabricated evidence that my mother was a traitor. They made me believe she got Marines killed through incompetence. They used my anger against her to turn me into a weapon aimed at destroying her credibility. I have submitted medical records documenting my injuries. I have submitted testimony from the contractors who held me, now in FBI custody, confirming they were acting on your orders. You did this to an American service member, a Navy SEAL, to protect your lies. The room went silent again. Different silence this time. The kind that comes when something fundamental shifts, when the narrative everyone expected gets blown apart. Senator James Morrison, ranking Republican, spoke up. His voice was careful, political. These are extraordinary allegations. If true, they would constitute treason, conspiracy, and violations of about a dozen federal statutes. But they require extraordinary proof. Commander Stone, you have provided documents. But documents can be forged. Financial records can be misinterpreted. Do you have anything more concrete? Rebecca pulled out a small digital recorder, set it on the table, pressed play. The voice that filled the room was Hartman's, younger, recorded years ago but unmistakable. The ATHENA program is a political liability. If it succeeds, we will be forced to integrate women into all special operations units. Training standards will be lowered. Unit cohesion will suffer. Our combat effectiveness will be compromised to satisfy social justice activists. We need to ensure the program fails. Feed them bad intelligence. Create situations where female operators are exposed to maximum risk. Document every mistake. Amplify every failure. When casualties occur, make sure the blame falls on the program, not on the circumstances. Do you understand? A second voice, also male, also unmistakable to anyone who had followed military news. Colonel James Brewster. I understand, General. What about collateral damage? If Marines or SEALs get killed in operations we sabotage? Acceptable losses. Better a few good men die now than thousands die later, because we allowed women to weaken our military. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the reporters had stopped typing. Senators stared at Hartman. Cameras captured his face going pale. Owens's voice was ice. General Hartman, is that your voice on that recording? Hartman was breathing hard, calculating, looking for an exit that did not exist. That recording is classified. Discussing it in open session is a violation of national security protocols. I demand this hearing be moved to closed session. Senator Morrison leaned forward. General, that recording just documented you ordering the sabotage of a classified military program and accepting American casualties as acceptable losses. National security protocols do not protect criminal conspiracy. Rebecca leaned toward her microphone. For the record, Senators, this recording was made in 2006 during a planning meeting I attended as Athena 1. At the time, I was required to wear a concealed recording device on all interactions with senior leadership as part of security protocols Admiral Garrett implemented after the first mission compromise. He suspected insider sabotage but had no proof. The devices were standard issue for all Athena operators. When the program was shut down in 2008, I kept my archive as insurance against exactly this scenario. The recordings have been stored in a secure deposit box under a civilian identity, copied to multiple encrypted digital formats, with dead man switches that would release everything to media if I died unexpectedly. I have spent 16 years documenting the conspiracy because I knew someday the truth would have to come out. Senator Morrison made notes. So this recording is part of an official security protocol, not illegal surveillance? Correct, Senator. Admiral Garrett can confirm the recording policy was standard operating procedure for the Athena program. Admiral Garrett stood in the gallery. It was. I implemented it after Operation Crimson Sand when it became clear someone was feeding our operational details to hostiles. Every Athena operator carried voice-activated recording devices to all meetings, all briefings, all interactions with anyone outside the immediate team. The recordings were meant to protect the operators and identify the source of the leaks. Commander Stone's preservation of that archive may have been against protocol when she left service, but it was also the smartest insurance policy any of us could have had. Rebecca pressed on, gave him no space to recover. After that conversation, 3 Athena missions were compromised by intelligence failures. Operation Crimson Sand, where Ryan Madsen died, Operation Nightfall, where Lieutenant Commander Sarah Walsh was captured and later murdered to prevent her from testifying here. Operation Desert Falcon, where 4 contractors died in an ambush at a location only 5 people knew about, one of them being you, General. She pulled out mission logs, casualty reports, intelligence assessments, all marked with timestamps and classifications that proved they were authentic. You sabotaged us. You got your own people killed. And when the program was shut down in 2008, you thought you had won, thought the evidence was buried deep enough that nobody would ever find it. But we survived, General. The ghosts you tried to kill are standing right here in front of Congress and the world, and we are done being silent. Hartman's composure cracked. His voice rose to something close to a shout. You have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea what I sacrificed for this country. I fought in Vietnam when you were not even born. I helped create the SEAL program that made you. Everything I did was to protect the integrity of our military, to prevent politicians from turning our fighting forces into social experiments. Women do not belong in combat. Biology is not sexist, it is reality. And I will not apologize for defending that reality against people who put political correctness above combat effectiveness. Bull's voice cut through the general's tirade, calm, deadly. My son was not a political statement, General. He was a Marine. And he died because you fed Commander Stone's team bad intelligence to prove a point. You murdered him, not with a gun, with a lie, and you have been covering it up for 17 years. Admiral Garrett stood in the gallery, 4 stars gleaming. His voice carried the weight of 4 decades commanding men in combat. Doug, I served with you in Vietnam. I trusted you. I considered you a friend. When you told me Athena was failing, I believed you. When you said the program needed to be shut down, I supported you. Now I learned that you sabotaged it from the beginning, that you got Marines killed, that you tortured this woman's son, that everything I believed about you was a lie. He removed his 4-star insignia, set them on the bench in front of him. I am resigning my position as defense consultant, effective immediately. Not because of what you did to Athena, because of what you did to the men and women who trusted you, because you betrayed everything the uniform stands for, because you are a disgrace to 50 years of service. The room erupted again. Senators arguing, reporters shouting, Hartman standing at his table breathing hard, face red, the carefully constructed facade of decorated general crumbling into something desperate and cornered. Senator Owens hammered her gavel, took 10 minutes to restore order. When silence finally returned, her voice was hard. General Hartman, this committee will recommend immediate criminal investigation by the Department of Justice. You will surrender your security clearances effective today. Your military pension will be suspended pending outcome of said investigation, and you will be held in contempt of Congress if you refuse to answer questions. Do you understand? Hartman sat slowly, looked older suddenly, looked like a man watching his legacy burn in real time. I demand legal counsel before answering any further questions. That is your right. This hearing is recessed until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. General Hartman, you are ordered to remain in D.C. and available to this committee. The gavel came down. The room exploded into motion. Reporters rushing for exits to file stories. Senators huddling in urgent conversations. Military brass looking shell-shocked at watching a 4-star general get destroyed in public. Rebecca remained seated, felt Marcus's hand on her shoulder, felt Bull's presence solid and steady beside her, felt the weight of 17 years of silence finally lifting. They had done it, exposed the conspiracy, honored the dead, forced the truth into daylight where it could not be buried again. But as she watched Hartman being escorted out by federal marshals, watched his ramrod military posture finally breaking under the weight of consequences, she felt no triumph. Only exhaustion, only grief for all the wasted years, all the unnecessary deaths, all the lies that had poisoned everything they were supposed to stand for. Admiral Garrett approached, moved slowly, looked every one of his 68 years. Becca, I owe you an apology for believing him, for not questioning harder, for letting you disappear into shadows while he rewrote history. Rebecca stood, embraced the old man who had been her mentor and commander, and the closest thing to a father she had known in the service. You did not know, Admiral. None of us knew how deep it went. But we know now, and that has to be enough. Marcus joined them, put his arms around both. 3 generations of warriors holding each other up in the ruins of trust, betrayed and honor, finally restored. Bull stood apart, staring at the empty chair where Hartman had sat, thinking about Ryan, about 17 years of questions, about the closure that came not from understanding, but from justice finally being served. Agent Chen appeared at his side, put her hand on his shoulder. My sister would have been proud of what you did today, Sergeant Major. Standing up for Commander Stone, speaking truth about your son. That took more courage than any combat action. Bull's voice was rough. Your sister died keeping secrets for people who did not deserve her loyalty. Just like my son. Just like all of them. The least we can do is make sure their deaths meant something. They are going to write books about this, make movies, Turn it into another chapter in military history that gets taught at war colleges. But what I want is simpler. I want every parent who sends their kid off to serve to know that the system failed us, that generals lied, that people died for politics and money. I want them to demand better, to hold commanders accountable, to never let this happen again. Chen nodded. Then we make sure they know. We testify, we write, we speak. We do not let them bury this under classified stamps and national security claims. We keep the truth alive. The gallery was clearing now. Press rushing to file stories about the bombshell testimony. Military personnel escaping before they got dragged into the fallout. But a small group remained. Veterans from the support group, former ATHENA candidates, people who had been carrying pieces of this story without knowing how they fit together. Danny Ortiz approached Rebecca, the young Marine whose flashback crisis had started this entire cascade 8 days ago. He looked different now, stronger, more grounded. Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you for that night in the support group, for showing me I could come back from the flashbacks, and for this, for proving that the people I trusted to lead us did not always deserve that trust. It hurts, but it is better than living with lies. Rebecca put her hand on his shoulder. Danny, you saved Dr. Park that night when you pulled yourself out of the flashback. You showed more courage in 5 minutes than most people show in a lifetime. Keep coming to group. Keep fighting. Keep honoring your brothers by living well. The young Marine nodded, saluted, walked away with his head higher than when he arrived. One by one, the others came forward, shared their stories, their gratitude, their pain at learning how deep the corruption ran. Rebecca stood and received them all. The warrior who had been forced into hiding, the ghost who had stepped into light, the mother who had risked everything for her son and ended up saving something bigger. As the room finally emptied, as the lights dimmed and the cameras powered down, Rebecca stood alone at the witness table, looked at the empty chair where Hartman had sat, thought about all the battles still ahead, the investigations, the trials, the media circus, the inevitable pushback from people who would defend Hartman no matter what the evidence showed. But she also thought about Ryan Madsen, about Sarah Walsh, about Elena Martinez, about all the ghosts who had served in silence and paid with their lives for someone else's political games. Marcus appeared at her side, took her hand. Mom, what happens now? Rebecca looked at her son, saw the man he had become despite everything, despite her failures as a mother, despite 6 months of torture, despite learning that the system he had dedicated his life to was rotten at its core. Now we rebuild. We take the pieces that are worth saving and we build something better. We make sure the next generation of warriors, male and female, do not have to fight the same battles we did. We honor the dead by living well and serving honorably and refusing to quit even when the cost is everything. Do you think it will change anything? Really? Rebecca thought about Bull standing in front of Congress and calling a 4-star general a murderer, about Admiral Garrett resigning rather than serve a corrupted system, about Agent Chen providing evidence that could end her career, about Marcus choosing to testify despite the trauma it reopened. I think we made it impossible for them to hide anymore. The truth is out. What people do with it, that is on them. But at least they cannot say they did not know. They walked out of the hearing room together. Mother and son, Athena one and the SEAL who had paid the price for her service. They walked into a hallway full of cameras and reporters and questions they were not ready to answer. But they walked together, unbowed, unbroken, done with silence and shadows, and sacrificing truth for the comfort of lies. Behind them, the hearing room stood empty, the place where a conspiracy had been exposed, where a general had fallen, where the ghost had finally been honored. The Senate would reconvene tomorrow. More testimony, more evidence, more details of a 16-year campaign to bury the truth. Hartman would be indicted within a week, would face trial for conspiracy, murder, and violations of his oath so extensive they would require new legal frameworks to prosecute. But that was tomorrow's battle. Tonight, Rebecca Stone walked out of the Russell Senate office building with her son beside her and her team around her, and the knowledge that she had done what warriors do. She had stood her ground, spoken her truth, honored the fallen, and refused to quit even when the whole world wanted her to disappear. The ghosts were done hiding. The truth was out. And whatever came next, they would face it the same way they had faced everything else. Together, with honor and absolutely nothing left to lose. Outside, the DC night was cold and clear. Bull stood on the steps smoking a cigarette he had bummed from a reporter. Admiral Garrett sat on a bench looking up at stars you could barely see through the city lights. Agent Chen was on her phone filing reports that would end her NCIS career and start something new. Marcus and Rebecca joined them. 5 people who had walked into this day as separate individuals carrying separate pieces of pain. 5 people who would walk away as a team. A family built not from blood but from shared sacrifice and refusal to accept that evil could triumph just because it wore stars and medals and the weight of tradition. Bull flicked his cigarette into the gutter, looked at Rebecca. "What do we do now, Commander?" Rebecca smiled, the first real smile in days. "Now, Sergeant Major, we go get breakfast, because I have not eaten in 16 hours and saving the world is hungry work." They walked together into the DC night. 5 warriors whose war was not over, but whose moment of truth had been won. 5 people who had proven that honor still mattered, that truth still had power, that sometimes the most important battles were fought not with weapons, but with words and evidence, and courage to stand against the machine even when the cost was everything. Behind them, the Capitol dome gleamed white against the dark sky, symbol of democracy, of justice, of the idea that truth eventually prevails over lies. They had made that idea real today. And tomorrow they would do it again. Because that was what warriors did. They fought, they stood, they refused to quit. And when the battle was won, they found the next one. But tonight, they would eat breakfast together. They would share stories. They would honor the dead and celebrate the living, and remember that some things were worth more than rank or reputation or comfort. Things like truth and honor and family forged in fire. The ghosts had come home, and they were never going back into the shadows again. 6 months after the hearing, Coronado Island wore the kind of perfect California morning that made you forget winter existed anywhere else in the world. 72 degrees, salt breeze off the Pacific, joggers and cyclists sharing the coastal path with pelicans riding thermals above the surf. The kind of day that felt like a gift after everything that had come before. The building on Bayshore Drive had been a martial arts studio once, then a yoga center, then vacant for 2 years while the owner waited for the right tenant. Now a hand-painted sign hung above the door. ATHENA Foundation. Underneath in smaller letters, supporting female veterans in transition. The windows were covered with posters advertising self-defense classes, PTSD support groups, job training workshops, legal aid services. The parking lot held a dozen cars. Inside, the sound of women's voices raised in ki shouts as they practiced strikes and kicks on heavy bags. Rebecca Stone stood in the doorway watching her students work. 23 women ranging from 18 to 55. Army, Marines, Navy, Air Force. Some had seen combat. Some had support roles. All of them had served. All of them were struggling to find their place in a world that did not always know what to do with women who had learned to fight. The lead instructor called out a combination, jabai, cross, hook, roundhouse kick. The women moved together, not perfect, not SEAL team precise, but getting better, getting stronger, learning that the skills they had developed in service could translate to civilian life, learning that they were not broken just because they did not fit society's comfortable boxes for what women should be. Marcus Stone worked at a heavy bag in the corner. 6 months of physical therapy had rebuilt most of what captivity had stolen. He moved well, fluid, powerful, but there were still moments when his hands shook, still nights when the dreams came, still triggers that sent him back to that container ship in the months before. He had resigned from the SEALs 3 months ago. Honorable discharge, full benefits. Now he worked here, teaching, mentoring, finding purpose in helping others heal the way his mother had helped him. Bull Madsen sat in the small office reviewing applications for the Foundation's scholarship program, reading letters from women who wanted to learn self-defense but could not afford classes, women escaping domestic violence, women who had been assaulted and wanted to reclaim their power, women who just wanted to feel safe walking to their cars at night. He had become the Foundation's volunteer coordinator, spent 40 hours a week matching volunteers with needs, organizing fundraisers, handling the administrative work that kept the operation running. His wife's life insurance had been substantial. He had donated half to the Foundation, used the rest to buy the building outright, so Rebecca would never have to worry about rent or mortgages, or landlords who might not approve of women learning to break bones and shatter kneecaps. Some people thought that was an inappropriate use of retirement funds. Bull did not care what those people thought. Marie would have approved. She had always believed in using money to make the world better. The morning class ended. Women filed out chatting and laughing, promising to meet for coffee, making plans to attend next week's support group. The transformation Rebecca had watched over 6 months was remarkable. Women who had walked in the first day with eyes down and shoulders hunched now stood tall, made eye contact, moved through the world with the confidence that came from knowing they could defend themselves if necessary. One student lingered. Private First Class Amy Rodriguez, 22 years old, Army, sexual assault survivor. She had been coming for 4 months, still struggled with flashbacks, still flinched at sudden movements, but getting better. Learning to separate past trauma from present safety. Commander Stone, can I ask you something? Rebecca finished rolling up the training mats, of course. Do the nightmares ever stop? I mean, really stop. Not just get manageable, but actually go away. Rebecca looked at this young woman who reminded her of herself at that age. Scared, angry, trying to find solid ground after having it ripped away. Honestly, some of them do. Some of them just get quieter. You learn to live with them. You learn that having bad nights does not mean you are broken. It means you survived something that tried to break you. The nightmares are proof you are still fighting, still refusing to let what happened define everything you are. Amy nodded. Processing. Then how do you do it? Keep going, keep helping people. After everything you went through, the program, the conspiracy, having your own son tortured. How do you not just give up? Rebecca smiled, sad, understanding, because giving up would mean they won. The people who tried to bury Athena, the people who said women could not serve, the people who think trauma makes you worthless. I refuse to give them that satisfaction. Every woman I teach, every person who walks out of here stronger than when they walked in. That is me proving they were wrong. That is victory. Amy stood straighter, nodded. See you next week, ma'am. Rebecca watched her go, thought about all the Amy Rodriguez variations she had trained over 6 months, all the women carrying burdens society did not want to acknowledge, all the warriors who had served their country and been betrayed by systems that were supposed to protect them. The foundation had started small, just Rebecca and Marcus in a donated space. Then Bull had joined. Then Agent Sarah Chen had quit NCWIS and signed on as operations director. Then Admiral Thomas Garrett had volunteered to handle fundraising despite the Alzheimer's that was slowly claiming his memory. Then other Athena candidates had started appearing. Women who had washed out of the program but still carried the skills and the scars and the desire to help. Now they served 200 women a month. Self-defense classes, PTSD counseling, job placement assistance, legal aid for women fighting VA claims or dealing with discharge issues. A network of support built by people who understood what it meant to serve and sacrifice and come home to a country that did not quite know what to do with you. The door opened. Bull entered carrying coffee and a newspaper. Set both on Rebecca's desk without comment. She looked at the headline, General Douglas Hartman, sentenced to 20 years federal prison. Below it, a photo of the old warrior in Prison Orange, no longer 4 stars and ribbons, just a convicted felon who would die behind bars. The trial had taken 4 months. The evidence overwhelming. Audio recordings, financial records, testimony from Colonel Brewster, who had cut a deal to avoid life in prison, testimony from contractors who had worked for Hartman, testimony from Marcus about his torture, testimony from families of the dead. The defense had argued that Hartman was a patriot who had made hard choices to protect military readiness. The jury had disagreed. Convicted on 18 counts, including conspiracy, obstruction of justice, accessory to murder. Rebecca felt nothing looking at the photo. No satisfaction, no vindication, just emptiness where anger used to be. She had spent 17 years carrying rage at the people who had sabotaged Athena. Now that they were punished, now that justice was served, she found the anger had burned itself out. Left behind only the work of rebuilding. Bull sat down across from her, sipped his coffee. You okay? Rebecca nodded, just thinking about how much energy I wasted being angry. How many years I spent hiding instead of fighting. If I had spoken up sooner, maybe Sarah Walsh would still be alive. Maybe Marcus would not have spent 6 months in hell. Maybe a lot of things would be different. Bull shook his head. You cannot live in the maybe, Commander. You did what you thought was right at the time. You survived. You built this. He gestured at the foundation around them. You are helping people. That is what matters. Not the what-ifs, not the roads not taken. What you are doing right now, today. The wisdom of a man who had spent 17 years wondering if his son's death mattered. Who had finally found peace not in answers, but in action. In honoring Ryan by helping other warriors find their way home. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Mom, we have a situation. Woman outside says she needs to talk to you. Says it is urgent. Says she is Athena 4. Rebecca stood. Athena 4 had been one of the washouts. Jennifer Hayes had made it to week 3 before psychological evaluations flagged her as unsuitable for the stress. Last Rebecca heard, she was teaching at West Point. Married, 2 kids, living the quiet life the program had denied the graduates. She walked to the front entrance, found a woman in her mid-40s standing by a car. Professional clothes, expensive watch. The look of someone who had built a successful career and was not quite sure why she was here. Jennifer, it has been a long time. Jennifer Hayes turned. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. Commander Stone, I am sorry to just show up like this, but I saw the trial coverage, saw what Hartman did, and I need to tell you something I should have said 16 years ago. They sat on the bench outside, morning sun warm on their faces, pelicans diving for fish offshore. The world going on around them, oblivious to old wounds being reopened. Jennifer spoke quietly. When I washed out of Athena, I was angry, felt like I had failed, like I was not good enough. Then a few months later, I got a visit from someone, a colonel. He said he represented a group of officers concerned about the program. He said they needed someone on the inside, someone who could report back on how the program was progressing, who was succeeding, who might be vulnerable. Rebecca felt ice forming in her chest. They recruited you as an informant. Jennifer nodded, tears streaming now. They paid well, promised I would get promoted ahead of my peers if I cooperated, promised my career would not suffer for washing out. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that the program was dangerous, that women really could not handle SEAL-level operations. I believed what they told me because it was easier than admitting I had sold out. What did you tell them? Everything. Your training scores, your psychological evaluations, your relationships with other candidates, anything that might be used to predict how you would perform under stress or how you might be compromised. I gave them ammunition to destroy you, and they used it. They used it to sabotage missions, to put you in situations where you would fail, to get people killed. Jennifer broke down sobbing. Rebecca sat beside her, did not offer comfort, did not offer condemnation, just sat with the weight of this revelation. Another piece of the conspiracy, another betrayal. After a long silence, Rebecca spoke. Who recruited you? Jennifer pulled an envelope from her purse. Inside were documents, emails, bank statements, all pointing to the same name that had been at the center of everything. General Douglas Hartman. He is in prison now, serving 20 years. This information would not change his sentence, but I needed you to know, needed to confess, needed to ask if there is any way I can make this right. Rebecca looked at the woman who had betrayed her, thought about the easy path of anger, of cutting her off, of adding Jennifer to the list of enemies and moving on. Then she thought about Amy Rodriguez asking if the nightmares ever stopped, about Danny Ortiz fighting his way back from flashbacks, about Marcus rebuilding himself after torture, about all the people who had made mistakes and were trying to do better. She thought about what forgiveness actually meant. Not forgetting, not saying it was okay, but choosing not to let the betrayal define everything that came after. You want to make it right? Volunteer here, teach what you know, help the women we serve. Do the work, not because it earns forgiveness, but because it is what warriors do. We serve. Even when we have failed, even when we have fallen, we get back up and we serve. Jennifer looked at her with something like hope. You would let me, after what I did? Rebecca stood, extended her hand. I spent 17 years being angry, being bitter, carrying grudges that poisoned everything good in my life. I am done with that. You betrayed me. You own that. But you are here now trying to make it right. That is worth something. So yes, come volunteer. Help us build something better than what we lost. Jennifer took her hand, shook it. Thank you. I do not deserve this, but thank you. You are right. You do not deserve it. None of us deserve most of what we get in this life. good or bad, but we work with what we have. And right now, I have a foundation that needs volunteers, and you have skills we can use. So let us stop wasting time on what we deserve and start focusing on what we can do. They walked inside together. Rebecca introduced Jennifer to Marcus and Bull and the other volunteers, explained that she would be helping with administrative work and eventually teaching classes if she proved reliable. Some of the volunteers were skeptical, some understood. All of them accepted it because Rebecca had earned their trust, and if she said Jennifer deserved a second chance, then that was enough. The afternoon brought in more students, more classes, more women learning to defend themselves and reclaim power that trauma had stolen. Rebecca moved through the work with practiced efficiency, taught a knife defense seminar, led a support group for veterans with PTSD, reviewed grant applications for expansion funding. At 4 p.m., Admiral Garrett arrived for his shift at the front desk. He moved slowly now, the Alzheimer's progressing despite medication. Some days he was sharp. Other days he forgot where he was or who people were. But he kept showing up, kept trying to help, kept refusing to quit even as his mind betrayed him piece by piece. Rebecca sat with him in the office, reviewed the day's schedule, pointed out names of volunteers he might forget, made sure he had his medication. The old man who had commanded SEAL teams in combat reduced to needing reminders about basics. It was hard to watch, harder for him to live. Becca, can I ask you something? Of course, Admiral. Do you think it mattered? Everything we did, the testimony, the trial, burning down Heartland and the conspiracy, do you think it actually changed anything? Rebecca thought about that, about the news coverage that had faded after a month, about the congressional promises to reform that had been watered down by committees, about the military still arguing over women in combat roles despite all the evidence, about how systems resisted change even when change was clearly necessary. I think we proved that truth still has power, that lies cannot stand forever, that people who betray their oaths eventually face consequences. Whether that changes the system or just makes a dent, I do not know. But I know we have this place, this foundation, these women we help. That is real change. That is victory that cannot be taken away. Garrett nodded, satisfied. I am proud of you, Commander. Prouder than I have words for. You took everything they threw at you and you built something beautiful from the wreckage. That is what warriors do. We adapt. We overcome. We refuse to quit. His eyes were clear in that moment, lucid, seeing her completely. Then the fog returned. He blinked, looked around, confused. Where am I? You are at the ATHENA Foundation, Admiral. You work here. You help veterans. Right, I remember. He stood, straightened his cardigan. I should get to the front desk. People will be arriving soon. Rebecca watched him go. This man who had given his whole life to the Navy, who had sacrificed his health and his memory in service of ideals that sometimes failed to live up to their promise. He kept showing up anyway. Kept serving anyway. That was the real lesson. Not that the system was perfect, but that good people working within it could make it better. Evening brought the weekly support group. 15 veterans gathered in the main training room, sitting in a circle. No ranks, no hierarchy, just people who had served and were trying to find their way home. Dr. Helen Park still facilitated, still asked gentle questions, and created space for people to speak their truth. Bull attended now as a participant instead of an observer. Talked about Ryan, about 17 years of grief, about learning that his son's death was not meaningless, but was twisted by people with agendas, about finding peace not in understanding, but in honoring Ryan by helping others. The group listened. Some cried, some nodded recognition. All of them understood the particular pain of military loss. Danny Ortiz shared his progress. 6 months without a major flashback, working full-time, dating someone who understood his struggles, learning that PTSD was not a life sentence, just a condition that required management. He credited Rebecca's intervention that first night, credited the group, credited the slow, patient work of healing. Marcus spoke about torture, about betrayal, about learning to trust again, about the particular difficulty of rebuilding relationship with a mother he had spent years resenting, about discovering that forgiveness was not a moment but a process, about choosing daily to believe the best about people instead of assuming the worst. New members shared their stories. A female Marine who had been sexually assaulted and chaptered out when she reported it. An Army sergeant with TBI from repeated IED exposures who could not hold a job because of memory issues. A Navy corpsman who had watched too many people die and could not sleep without seeing their faces. The circle held them all, offered no solutions but plenty of presence, proved that you did not have to fix people to help them heal. After the session, as people filtered out making plans to meet for coffee or attend next week, Rebecca stood with Dr. Park reviewing notes. "You have built something remarkable here, Becca. In 6 months, you have created what most organizations take years to achieve. A real community, a place where people feel safe enough to be vulnerable." Rebecca shook her head. "I just provided space. They did the work. All those people sharing and supporting each other. That is them choosing healing. I am just the landlord." Park smiled. "You are much more than that. You are proof that trauma does not have to be the end of the story, that you can survive the worst things imaginable and still build something beautiful. That is powerful. That changes lives." They locked up together, walked to the parking lot under stars that were just becoming visible in the deepening dusk. Rebecca stood for a moment, breathing salt air and listening to waves crash somewhere beyond the buildings. This place, this work, this life she had built from the ruins of ATHENA, it was not what she had planned, not what she had imagined when she volunteered for that classified program 21 years ago. But it was good, it was real, it was hers. Marcus appeared at her elbow. "Mom, we still on for dinner?" They had started having weekly dinners 3 months ago, trying to rebuild a relationship that anger and absence had damaged. It was awkward sometimes. They were still learning how to talk to each other, still navigating the space between who they had been and who they were becoming. But they kept trying, kept showing up. That was what mattered. "Absolutely. Where are we going?" "There is a new Thai place near the base. Bull said he would meet us there. Agent Chen is coming too, and Admiral Garrett if he is having a good day." "So family dinner?" Marcus smiled. "Yeah, I guess it is." They drove separately, met at a small restaurant decorated with photographs of Bangkok and silk paintings of elephants. The kind of place that served authentic food to people who actually knew the difference. Bull was already there, had claimed a large table in the back. Agent Chen arrived minutes later carrying a bottle of wine and apologies for being late. Admiral Garrett did not come. His son Daniel called to say the old man was having a bad evening, could not remember where he was supposed to be. It happened more often now, the disease advancing despite everything they tried. Someday soon he would not remember any of them, would not remember Athena or the trial or the foundation, would not remember the life he had lived in service of ideals bigger than himself. But for now, on good days, he still showed up, still tried. That was all anyone could ask. They ordered food, shared dishes, family style, talked about the foundation's growth, about plans to open a second location in Los Angeles, about grant applications and fundraising events and the daily work of building something sustainable. They talked about Bull's daughter visiting from Seattle with his grandchildren, about Agent Chen's new job with a nonprofit investigating military sexual assault cases, about Marcus's physical therapy progress and his plans to maybe go back to school for psychology degree. They did not talk about Heartland, did not talk about the trial or the conspiracy or any of the darkness that had brought them together. That was the past. This was the present. This meal, this table, these people who had become family through shared trauma and shared purpose. After dinner, walking to the parking lot, Bull pulled Rebecca aside, spoke quietly so the others would not hear. "I visited Ryan's grave today. First time since the trial. I told him about the foundation, about the women we are helping, about you and Marcus rebuilding, about all of it. And for the first time in 17 years, standing there, I felt like maybe his death mattered, like maybe it led to something good. Does that make sense?" Rebecca put her hand on his shoulder. "It makes perfect sense. Ryan's sacrifice gave me 90 seconds. Those 90 seconds gave me a life. That life gave me Marcus. That relationship gave me purpose to keep fighting. That fighting exposed Hartman. That exposure created space for this foundation. It is all connected, all of it. Ryan's death was not meaningless. It was the beginning of something we are still building." Bull nodded, eyes wet. "Thank you for that. Thank you for making his death mean something. You made it mean something, Sergeant Major. By refusing to let the lies stand, by demanding answers, by standing with me when nobody else would, Ryan would be proud of you." They stood together in the parking lot, two warriors from different generations, bound by loss and purpose and refusal to quit. Around them, Coronado went about its evening. People laughing in restaurants, cars passing on the street. The ordinary world that existed because people like them were willing to do extraordinary things to protect it. 3 months later, Rebecca stood at Arlington National Cemetery on a cold November morning. The sky was gray, the trees bare, rows of white headstones stretching into the distance like soldiers at eternal attention. She had visited this cemetery many times over the years, always the same grave, always the same ritual. Flowers, a moment of silence, words spoken to a man who could not hear but somehow deserved to know. Captain Ryan Madsen, November 12, 2007, age 24, United States Marine Corps. Bull stood beside her, no longer crying at this grave, no longer carrying questions without answers, just standing in respect for a son who had lived with honor and died with courage. Bull came here every year on the anniversary, would continue coming until age or death prevented it. Some rituals were too important to abandon. But this year they were not alone. Marcus had come, wearing his dress whites, standing at attention, saluting a Marine he had never met who had died so his mother could live. Agent Chen had come, honoring the sister who had been killed keeping Athena's secrets, honoring Rhinand who had died in the same conspiracy. Admiral Garrett had come on a good day, lucid, present, understanding where he was and why it mattered. He wore his dress whites, 4 stars gleaming, chest full of ribbons, standing straight despite the disease eating his mind, honoring a warrior he had never met but whose sacrifice had changed everything. Dr. Park had come, representing all the veterans they served, all the broken people learning to heal, all the warriors finding their way home. Danny Ortiz had come, the young Marine whose flashback had started this entire cascade, standing tall now, grounded, whole, proof that trauma did not have to be permanent. And behind them, 23 women from the Foundation's self-defense classes, veterans and civilians, women who had learned to fight, who had reclaimed power, who stood in silent witness to a sacrifice they had not known about until recently but understood deeply. Rebecca placed flowers on the grave, white roses, the same ones she had brought for 17 years. Then she stood back. Let Bull have his moment, his private words with a son who would never age, never disappoint, never be anything but the hero who had died holding a line so others could live. When Bull stepped back, Rebecca spoke, her voice carrying across the assembled group. Captain Madsen gave me 90 seconds. In those 90 seconds, I completed a mission that saved 17 American lives and prevented intelligence disaster that could have cost dozens more. But the ripples did not stop there. Those 90 seconds gave me a life. That life gave me a son. That relationship gave me purpose to keep fighting. That fighting exposed a conspiracy. That exposure created the ATHENA Foundation. And that foundation has now served over 800 women in less than a year. 800 lives touched. 800 people stronger. 800 reasons why Ryan Madsen's sacrifice mattered. She paused. Let the number sink in. 800 from 90 seconds. That is the mathematics of service. That is what happens when good people choose to stand their ground, even when the cost is everything. Bull's voice was rough but steady. My son did not know any of that would happen. He just saw people who needed help and decided their lives mattered more than his own. That is what warriors do. We serve. We sacrifice. We stand the watch so others can sleep peacefully. Ryan understood that at 24, better than most people understand it at 84. Marcus stepped forward. I born. Sir, I never met your son, but I am alive because of him. My mother is alive because of him. And I promise you that we will spend the rest of our lives honoring his memory by serving others the way he served, by refusing to quit, by standing for what is right even when the cost is high. That is the legacy he left. That is what we will carry forward. The group stood in silence, honoring a man most of them had never met, a hero whose name would never appear in history books, a warrior who had done his duty without fanfare or recognition or expectation of reward, the kind of person who made America worth defending. After several minutes, they began to disperse, walking back to cars, making quiet conversation, planning the drive back to Coronado and the work that waited there. But Rebecca lingered, Bull beside her, just the two of them in the grave and the weight of 17 years finally lifting. I am going to stop coming here every week. Bull's voice was quiet, decided. Not because I am forgetting Ryan, but because I do not need to stand at his grave to honor him anymore. I honor him by living well, by helping others, by doing the work. He understands that. I think he would want that. Rebecca nodded. I think you are right. I think he would want you to live, to be happy, to find peace, not to spend every week standing at a grave mourning what was lost instead of celebrating what remains. What about you? Will you keep coming? Not as often. Maybe just the anniversary. Maybe just when I need to remember why I keep fighting. But Bull, I want you to know something. Ryan's death was not your fault. You did not fail him. You raised him to be the kind of man who would sacrifice himself for others. That is not failure. That is success as a father. Bull's voice broke. Thank you for saying that. I have needed to hear it for 17 years. They walked together toward the parking lot, two warriors who had carried impossible burdens and were finally learning to set them down. Behind them, Ryan Madsen's grave stood silent, white marble gleaming, American flag stirring in cold November wind, a monument to sacrifice that would endure long after everyone who remembered him personally was gone. But the legacy would continue, in the foundation, in the lives touched, in the 800 women who had learned to stand tall because Ryan Madsen had given 90 seconds that changed everything. That evening, Rebecca sat in her small apartment above the foundation, the same space she had lived in for 3 years. Modest, functional, nothing fancy but enough. She had declined offers to move somewhere better, declined the book deals and movie options and speaking engagements that could have made her wealthy. This work was not about profit. It was about purpose. Her phone buzzed. Text message from a number she did not recognize. She almost deleted it. Then something made her open it. Betrayed Athena. But I wanted you to know, betrayed Athena. But I wanted you to know that I testified at Hartman's trial, told everything. It cost me my career and my pension, but it was the right thing to do. I am working as a civilian contractor now, teaching self-defense to military spouses on bases around the country. It is not much, but it is honest work. Thank you for showing me that redemption was possible, that people who fail can still serve. Semper Fi. Rebecca stared at the message for a long moment, thought about Jessica Vance, the woman who had sold Athena intelligence to people who used it to get Marines killed, the woman who had been part of the conspiracy from the inside, the woman who had finally chosen truth over comfort and paid the price. She typed a response. Commander Vance, thank you for your courage in testifying. If you ever want to volunteer at the Foundation, we would be honored to have you. The work is hard but meaningful. And you were right. Redemption is possible. But it requires daily choice to do better, to serve better, to be better. Keep choosing well. Fair winds and following seas. She sent the message, set down the phone, looked around her small apartment, at the photos on the wall, Marcus in his SEAL dress whites, Bull with his grandchildren, Admiral Garrett on a good day smiling at the camera. The Foundation volunteers gathered for a group photo. Her family, not bound by blood but by shared sacrifice and purpose. On her desk sat a small wooden box. Inside, the Trident pin she had worn on her jacket the night of her arrest. The pin that had started everything. She had not worn it since the trial, did not need to anymore. The world knew who she was, what she had done. The secrets were out. The ghost had come home. She closed the box, put it in a drawer. That was the past. This was the present. Tomorrow would bring more students, more classes, more women learning to stand tall, more veterans finding their way home, more work that mattered. Rebecca Stone, Athena 1. The ghost who had served in silence for 17 years was done hiding. She was home. She was building. She was serving. And she would never quit. Not as long as there were people who needed help. Not as long as there were wrongs to right. Not as long as there was breath in her lungs and strength in her arms and fire in her heart. Because that was what warriors did. They adapted, they overcame, they refused to quit. And when the battle was won, they found the next one. The work was not finished. It would never be finished. But it was good work, honest work, work that honored the dead by serving the living, work worth doing. And that was enough. Outside her window, Coronado Island settled into evening. Lights coming on in houses, families gathering for dinner, children playing in yards. The ordinary peaceful world that existed because people like Rebecca Stone and Ryan Madsen and all the others who had served were willing to stand the watch. They would never know her name. Most of them would never know about Athena or the conspiracy or the price paid for their safety. That was fine. That was how it should be. The best victories were the ones nobody had to know about. The best service was the kind rendered in silence. But Rebecca knew, Bull knew, Marcus knew, the 800 women they had served knew, the thousands more who would come through the Foundation's doors in years ahead would know. And that was enough. The ghost had come home. The truth had been told. The work continued, and somewhere in Arlington, under a white marble headstone, Captain Ryan Madsen rested in the knowledge that his 90 seconds had changed everything, that his sacrifice had mattered, that the warriors he saved had honored him by refusing to quit, by building something beautiful from the ashes, by proving that some things were worth more than life itself, things like honor and duty and service to something bigger than yourself. The last guardian had kept her watch, and now she was passing the torch to those who came after, teaching them to stand tall, to fight hard, to never quit, teaching them that being a warrior was not about gender or politics or anything except the choice to serve, the choice to stand when others ran, the choice to fight when others surrendered, the choice to keep going when everything said to quit. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. That was what endured when all the secrets were finally told and all the ghosts came home. The work of warriors, yesterday, today, tomorrow. Forever, 17 years. That's how long Sergeant Major Madsen carried questions about his son's death in Fallujah. Then one night he accused the wrong woman, or maybe exactly the right one. This story hit me hard because it's about the warriors we never hear about, the classified heroes, the fathers who wonder if their sons' sacrifices mattered, the truth that takes decades to surface. Which moment got you? The arrest? The recording? Arlington? Drop a comment below. And if this resonated, hit subscribe. Next Thursday's story is about a Vietnam pilot who discovered his wingman never actually died.